We're live.
Players, and welcome back. This is awesome, guys. So much importance we want to cover in today's episode. So aside from the fact the local football flavor is going to be bringing you your questions and answers, bringing you great results, if you're watching this on a replay, feel free to submit your questions. We will hit them in the next episode. We're coming out trying to be 3 to 4 times a week. Obviously, Thursday is our last day of the week, bringing great knowledge. And Bob, I want you to start with something you concluded our last show about, which is the art of successfully making a fantasy football trade and how you need to go about it successfully to get the maximum return. So, Bob, why don't you start by off the bat, how do we do trades and do them good in ways where people actually accept them? Because early fantasy football, week 6 and before, it can be the lifeblood of a championship.
Yeah, so I mean, in most leagues, one of the biggest things is to be reasonable, right? Is that even if a star player has had a down week, and even if star players had a boom week, right? Is that you want to be as reasonable as you can in your offer without potentially giving your best offer right off the bat. So, like, if I'm going after a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example, who had a down week, I know that he still has the potential to get 17, 18, 20 points a week. And that's what I'm aiming for. So when I'm offering a deal, I'm going to construct one based upon what that team needs, right? If I have the ability to fulfill that team need, I might not. So if I want to get a guy like Amon-Ra, right, on my team, then I might have to go out there and look at other pieces that maybe that person might be interested in, right? Maybe I'm bringing in somebody else, maybe some third team on the trade, but ideally, you want to keep this to a trade that if you're conducting one, that it's reasonable, because nobody will scoff at a reasonable offer. But however, hey, George, how's it going? Yeah, I'm willing to answer. I've got a lot of things to think about as well with, especially with that Miami game tonight. When it comes to thinking about your trades, and you're targeting a guy like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon put up one of the best games that we've seen Joe Mixon put up in a while. He's capable of putting up 50 points. He might regularly get in that 15 to 20 point range, 12, 15 points as well. You want to throw out there an offer that's not, you don't want to offer something like, Marvin Mims and J.K. Dobbins, because even though J.K. Dobbins had a great week, it's not going to get accepted. And you're most likely, hey, Carlos, and you're most likely going to get laughed at. And that's the art of building that trade first, is to make something reasonable that will start the conversation, right? And speaking of starting conversations here, we have Carlos here. Welcome, Carlos. Carlos has a question: is Kamara or Kenneth Walker this week? So when we look at,
well, this one's pretty easy actually, Bob.
Yeah,
Walker's not playing.
When we look at our rankings, Kenneth Walker is actually ahead in our rankings than Kamara. But when we're looking at the injury concern, especially when we're looking at the abdomen area and his past history with the oblique, on Thursday right now, it's hard to make a determination about who to start in this game. I have Kenneth Walker, and I'm rolling Kenneth Walker right now. If I see,
and so do the numbers. You're right, Bob. Looking at the 6 score and factoring everything in, even with his abdominal, if he plays, Walker is the better one. You just got to be prepared for Walker not to play.
And here's the other thing, Carlos, before we get to George's questions here, is that the benefit for the Seahawks this week is that their game actually is in the early part of the window, right? So they're playing in the early part of the window, which allows us that if for some reason on Sunday morning you wake up Sunday morning and Kenneth Walker can't go, that you can pivot. You can easily pivot to Kamara. But out of the gate right now, I'm starting Kenneth Walker, and that's not really a question in my mind about who I'd rather have there. I'm starting Kenneth Walker against New England versus Kamara versus Dallas. I think that Kamara is going to have a pretty good return on value because Dallas does have a good defensive front, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Kamara through the air as a slot receiver. To that nature, I think that will be a good game for Kamara. So I roll with Kenny Walker, but in the off chance that he doesn't play, or even if it suggests that he's like a game time decision, but all the way leading up to that, he's probable, I might even roll Kamara on that. So King, hey, welcome back. Let's get to George's first question here. First one, I didn't use my first waiver priority to pick up Irving. Either way, nobody picked him up. Should I still add him and drop Trey Benson or wait this week? I think on this end, I think that I'm still on Bucky Irving. I know a lot of people and a lot of content creators will still be on Trey Benson, knowing that Arizona is also capable of moving the ball. But when we look at this from a perspective of long run, right, is that Trey Benson is, hey, Major, we'll get to that question as well. We're going to answer all the questions here. You're welcome, Carlos.
Yes, we will.
You
up. We got you, baby.
As it goes, I still feel like Bucky Irving is the better call here. Trey Benson, it's going to be hard to drop a Trey Benson. So maybe if you're not sure about dropping him, George, maybe you can piece him together and move him with something else to maybe upgrade your team in another way. But I think I'd rather have Bucky Irving right now because he does still have right now standalone value, whereas Trey Benson, as long as James Conner is really entrenched in that role and not hurt, doesn't really have much value. Hey, Amon, we're going to get to that question as well. So that's kind of my viewpoint there on Trey Benson and Bucky Irving. I would rather have Bucky Irving than Trey Benson. And when talking about the waiver, someone dropped Ferguson and JSN. Should I pick these up? I think it's definitely interesting to consider JSN because even though that game had Gino in that game, it was an odd week for Gino. He had that rushing touchdown. There wasn't a lot to be found through the air. The game really wasn't like Seattle really wasn't, even though the box score says that it was close, it wasn't close. It wasn't really that close. And JSN, we thought that JSN was going to do really well. That ended up not being the case in this game. But when we go back and we kind of look at this box score, how it shook down, Kenny Walker was relied on more in this game to kind of just end it. And JSN had 2 receptions on 2 targets, which is that kind of Olave type number that we got last week. So that's kind of, hey, Javi, we'll answer that question for sure too.
Bob, on that point,
I think that he's worth picking up. Tyler Lockett had a great game, but this young player in JSN definitely gives Seattle different looks and different opportunities to win. I think he's really valuable to pick up. Would I pick him up based off of what I know about your team? I don't know who I would drop from your team to pick him up, but yeah, he's worth it.
But also, George, to your point here, I definitely would pick up Ferguson, especially since you got the IR spot to do it, because he's not going to be playing this week, and you can do that. And then on the point of JSN, we have him as the 40th ranked receiver for this week.
King, to your question, how are we feeling about Tua, Burrow, and Baker? I like Tua this week.
You have to. His running backs ain't playing.
I like Tua this week. There's going to be, with Devin Achane hurt, with Wright potentially maybe getting a nod, with Jeff Wilson definitely getting a nod in this game. I really like Tua this week. When it comes to Baker against Detroit could be a sneaky good play. We have Baker ranked decently high for these Sunday games. And when it comes to this game, we just saw Cooper Kupp just like explode all over Detroit's face. And
it's a technical term, by the way, people.
And for me, out of those 2 guys, how I would rank them would be Tua, Baker, and then Burrow. I'm just not, I like Joe Burrow. But when it comes to week to week, Cincinnati's a tough matchup, man. Like that is really going to be a tough matchup for Burrow. Him being hurt, with T. Higgins being hurt, with Chase being the option, I see this game as not going in the direction of the Bengals very easily. And Burrow could be throwing a lot, but they need to understand that if this game is out of order and Burrow has to throw a lot, that's probably not good for the long term of Burrow across the season. So how I would rank it would be I'd start Tua tonight. And usually I don't like to start quarterbacks on Thursday night football. But this matchup is really good for them because of the running back injuries as well. So I'd go Tua, Baker, Burrow.
Yeah, and we look at our listing here overall for it.
Hey, RGP, welcome back.
We have Baker as the number 8 quarterback this week. We have Burrow. Where the hell's Burrow at, Bob? Burrow's.
Burrow's.
Yeah, all right. So there you go. Burrow's 10.
And where our rankings are at is for the Sunday slate, so we don't have the Thursday slate in there because we were ranking these for DFS for the upcoming week. So Tua would be above both of them in terms of our rankings.
Yeah, that's right.
When it comes to this question, George, before we get to Major and Javi's and Amon's question and RGQ's question, we have this question here from George: is should I start Waddle and Moore or give a chance for Flowers or Brian Thomas? Now, for everybody that's watching right now who is trying to help with answering George's question here, George is in a standard league. So this is not a PPR league. This is not a half PPR league. This is a standard league. So where in PPR leagues, it might be easier to say a guy like Zay. I think in my imagining here, Joe, and now our rankings are based upon like PPR and half PPR. So when I look at this and I'm translating it through, I think that when we look at where Caleb Williams is ranked in our rankings, it's pretty low. But when we see that Brian Thomas is facing off against Cleveland, and then we have Waddle tonight. Waddle is a definite start for me, no doubt. That's not even a question. I
don't know. Hill's the start for me, no doubt.
Yeah, but in this game, Waddle, out of these four players, Waddle is the definitive start out of those four players for me when it comes to what's going to happen in this game script tonight. When we look at Chicago's going to have to play up to Houston on that Sunday night game. And I think that with Caleb Williams struggling in this first game and what we got out of DJ Moore in the first game, I'd be a little bit hesitant to roll DJ Moore in that game. But when I come and I look at what Baltimore's rolling against here. Where's their matchup right here? Baltimore's against Vegas. I'm on Flowers. I think I do Waddle and Flowers, even knowing it's a standard league. I think that Flowers is going to have plenty of opportunities this week to be really successful. And if they can stop that pass rush from Max Crosby, like Joe Alt did last week, I think that Flowers will have a lot of space to get through the openings, like just downfield a little bit more. But even if Max Crosby starts pressuring Lamar a lot, Zay is still going to have value. And if he can turn up against this secondary, I think that there's going to be, like Quentin Johnston did a little bit last week. I think that there's definitely some benefits, and Ladd McConkey did it last week as well. I think there's definitely some benefits to Flowers. So I start Waddle and Flowers. I'd think about Brian Thomas, but I'd err on Flowers and Waddle at this point in the week. Major, I got offered Devontae Adams for Chris Olave, both risky. I'm back and forth on this one, full PPR. And everybody in the chat can also help out here. Everybody else can also help out in the chat here. If you watched on Wednesday or Tuesday, I'm not on Olave. I'm selling Olave hard. But as it stands for just this question right here, and I want to bring this straight up for everybody who's watching right now who wants to go out and potentially get a guy like Olave. Last year, and I got into an argument with somebody about this too. Last year and the year before.
You do that.
We look at all these games. Olave has played in 32 games. He has been a wide receiver 24 or better in about 50% of the games that he has played in. He has been a top 15 player in about 30% of the games that he's played in. He has never been a top 5 player in a given week. The amount of times that he's been in the top 10 is around 4 out of 32. All right. And this is in PPR. Some of those performances that he did well in were with Jameis Winston, were with Andy Dalton. The highest amount of points that he's ever scored with Derek Carr is 23.7. And that week, he was wide receiver 11. If you take out Amari Cooper's boom week that week, this was week 16 last year, which was 51 points, he was wide receiver 10. And that was his best week. And that was during a game where Carr threw 40 times. Okay. So Gardner Minshew was on what they were on 60 plays last week. The Raiders did, right? And with Chris Olave, right, you got to go through and you got to look at it and you say, okay, realistically speaking, how many games is New Orleans going to be in? Because it seems that against weaker teams and against teams that they're out of it in, that they're going to pass the ball to Olave more. But if they're in that game and they're winning that game, Olave is irrelevant in most of that. In that, because I say irrelevant as a fantasy player, not as a football player himself, because he does. And Carr was interviewed by Golf Live or whatever down in New Orleans to say, we value him so much more than just his pass catching ability. And for me, if I'm looking for a fantasy player, I want him to value that more. He said, I would throw it to him 40 times a game if I could, but he didn't. Right. So that tells me that they want to win these games, and Olave's not kind of the critical role for them to win these games, which is a bit concerning for me. Right. Bigums, we'll get to that question too. RGQ, what's that info about Neighbors? That's really good to know. But when we look at Adams, we say, okay, this is the second year in a row where also he has in the past put up credible wide receiver 1 numbers. But right now, with this quarterback discrepancy, and even with Minshew, there's a case to be made that he is very similar to Olave, right? That's why this is such a risky back and forth type of deal. For me, I would rather have Devontae, because I know that Devontae, if given the opportunity, can potentially turn in a wide receiver 1 finish, period. But I know, given any week, Chris Olave has to get 25 to 30 points to even crest into that kind of area of the top 5. And I just don't believe it unless Carr is throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. And he's done that in the past, but that has proved not fruitful for them to win games. And so I think if the Saints want to win games, he's not going to be throwing the ball that much. And in order to be successful, Olave needs that. I think Devontae Adams is the play. And I don't know how Joe feels about that, but
yeah, I mean, Bob, first of all, I love how you outlined that case there. And, you're right. They are both risky. But the thing is that Adams is a much, much better football player than Olave. Bob, you keep flipping these too quick while I'm still answering the prior question. But Adams is so much of a better football player. And to the point of what Carr was saying,
we're going to get to all those questions.
I really don't think enough was made out of it, because you had the power to throw the ball to any single person in the world. Carolina's defense sucked, and their best player got hurt in the middle of that game, and you didn't. So I'm leading Devontae. That being said, I don't think he's going Olave this week either, because of Diggs. Carr has become an interceptions scaredy cat, and Stephon Diggs will pick you off. Everyone knows that reputation of him.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking go with Minshew, who doesn't care, throwing it to the better player anyway. To me, that's kind of an easy one.
So here, Javi, I don't do this. I think that Schultz has zero value.
Right.
As long as Stephon Diggs is there, Schultz has zero value. So this would be a trade of Bowers for Deontay Johnson. And I know I was talking the other day about trading out of Bowers, but I wouldn't trade out of Bowers to get into Deontay Johnson. No. So I would keep Bowers, wait for a better deal. I think that Bowers has a good case to be made for, a couple of good weeks here and there. And remember, the floor of tight ends is low, right? In order to reach a tight end 1 game, there are times where a tight end 1 game could be 12 points, or it could be 25 points, or it could be 30 points.
It's sporadic.
And then the 5 next best tight ends score in the low 20s to teens. So I think Brock Bowers is definitely capable of that. He's going to get a decent amount of volume. He could get a lot of volume this week against Baltimore. I don't do that trade.
And also on that point of that trade, you look at last week, Carolina would never have had more garbage time ever than what they had last week. They still didn't make Devontae Johnson a relevant part of that team.
Deontay Johnson, yeah. Not even close. To your question here, Amon, thanks for joining us, Amon. Do I start Ladd or Ridley this week? And you mentioned regretting drafting Ridley. I took Ridley in our auction league for super, super cheap because I was buying into the late Will Levis kind of buy-in here. But it's Ladd for us all the way.
Yeah. There's 25 players in between the two of them.
Here's the thing about Ladd, and this is what was really nice to see last week, was that I know week 1 is not really indicative of the whole season, but at least it's a number to build off of, especially for a rookie, is that in his rookie game, he's in there and he's getting 7 targets. He made a great move at the goal line. I mean, this kid knows how to play, and he's obviously probably one of the better wide receivers on a team that's playing the worst or second worst at the very minimum defense in the NFL. He's not going to be the guy that J.C. Horn covers, just like Olave got locked out in week 1. He's not going to be the guy that's covered there. Ladd McConkey's going to be all over the field. This could get really gross for Carolina, and it could be really good for Ladd McConkey. The who we have Ladd ranked around is around Zay and DK Metcalf for the Sunday slate. So that's good company to be in.
And again, the reason we had the Sunday slate blocked off is because we're doing DraftKings in the background.
Hey, Steve,
we love that you're bringing all your questions. Keep doing them. But if we ever have a dry spell, we're going to go to some of these DFSs.
So RGQ, 0.5 PPR, start 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 flex. Pittman, Flowers, Coleman, Reed, Najee, Ford, and Jacobs. So when I look at this, we were talking on Tuesday about, trying to move yourself out of Pittman. I would start Flowers. Especially in PPR, I think he's going to feast against this defense. And then when it comes to tonight, I know a lot of people are suggesting to not start any of the Bills wide receivers with confidence, but I am starting Coleman with confidence. I do like Keon Coleman, especially when we look at this game where Brian Thomas in that rookie performance week 1 against Miami. This is a team that is better than Jacksonville is. They're going to move the ball better, and I think this is a great play, a great week for Keon Coleman to play. I avoid Jayden Reed only because unless he can gadget himself into some plays, we know Malik Willis is veritably like a dumpster fire and a half, and he's. The fact that the Packers, and my opinion will not change about Malik Willis, even if he turns in a good game this week, because what I saw last year is he physically lost Tennessee that game, and I believe
you know about the overtime game against Kansas City last year.
He physically lost them that game because he's not good. So I would not hinge any of those hopes on Reed. Now, in regards to the running back position here. If we look up where Najee is our 10th best running back this week against the Denver defense. That's
bad.
Kenny Walker totally destroyed them. You might get Jaylen Warren coming back a little bit better this week, but I think Najee's definitely starts. So I do Flowers, Coleman, and Najee for sure. Then it's down to the other two. And the thing is, let's be serious here. Ford is acceptable, right? He's acceptable, but we do have Jacobs ranked higher for the sheer fact that Malik Willis is so garbage. I mean, it's imperative.
Can you say that again, Bob? Is Malik Willis any good?
It's imperative that they get Jacobs the ball. So for me and our rankings, it's Flowers, Coleman, Najee, Jacobs. George said that he doesn't have an IR spot to have Ferguson on. So so don't pick up Ferguson if you don't have the IR spot. You can't pick up Ferguson. No. If
Ferguson is going to be the worst case scenario because you're going to get the questionable all week.
Hey, senor, welcome back.
Right before the game
starts. We'll get to your question in a moment.
Like, you don't want to play that game with any player, and then not to mention once he comes back, it's going to take him 2 weeks to come back.
And so
let Ferguson die on the vine for a little bit.
RGQ, Joe and I are on the same wavelength as you. We are at some point in time hearing things through the grapevine. Knowing that the Raiders are not a good team, knowing that he's not very happy there is a very good likelihood that by the midseason we see Davante Adams traded to a team that's a contender. I don't see him being traded to anybody that not like a Buffalo or anything because they might be able to afford it, but it would take a little bit longer to look at those books a little bit more. But I think if Davante Adams does get traded to a contender, that stonks go up to the moon, as they say on Wall Street Bets and on Reddit.
And so does Myers. And to put 2 contenders out there to look out for, obviously the Rams just jumped to the list depending upon Nakua. The other one to keep a sneaky look at it is Baltimore. I really believe that Baltimore's going to play. They have a little bit of cap money to be able to make some stuff happen. Imagine him on Baltimore. It could get crazy.
It could get crazy. Bigums, we confirm Najee over Ford.
Yes.
Definitely Najee over Ford. So Bigums here, MHJ versus Neighbors. PPR, as RGQ has said, and you've said yourself, Bigums, with Neighbors being added to the injury report is definitely a concern. Here's my other concern. Although Washington sucks, and the Giants stink as well.
Yes, they do.
This is a game. This is a game that, logically speaking, I am starting guys like Jaden Daniels from this game. I am starting Terry McLaurin from this game. I am even, to a degree, starting Wan'Dale Robinson on DFS lineups, and in my Yahoo League as like a second or third flex if you have 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes because Mostert got hurt. But what I don't like about Neighbors in this game is the fact that when we look at what happened last week, Chris Godwin got more reps being in the slot. So this Washington team, although they are not good on defense, Evans was kind of held in check just a bit, and Godwin was the guy that went off. So I think that in this game, I'd rather have Wan'Dale Robinson over Neighbors. So for this answer and for our rankings, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. ranked as really high above Terry McLaurin and in between Zay and Terry McLaurin in our rankings. So I would start MHJ over Neighbors in this respect.
And I also want to hit before you flick this one, and this is a general comment mostly about
King. If you could trade the Buffalo, that'd be crazy.
Harrison, Amah, and to a degree Lamb. All 3 of these are superstars of their teams. Now, Harrison might need to prove it more than the other 2, but especially with Amah and Lamb, they are going to get an obscene amount of
Steve, we're going to get there. Jonathan, we're going to get there too.
Just because that's the way the general managers work. If you get a big gun that doesn't get targeted, they're going to blow up the following week. Amah is going to be a top 3 receiver this week. I will guarantee it. I believe Lamb will also be a top 3 receiver. And that's knowing Tyreek Hill's dropping 30 tonight.
George, I'm considering trading Gibbs. I know we talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. I have these ideas, Gibbs and Flowers for Bijan and Coleman, or Gibbs and Flowers for Kyron and Drake London. This is what we talked about when it comes to trading, is that Gibbs has a lot of value. Kyron has a lot of value, and so does Bijan have a lot of value. So that's kind of like thinking of it, okay, I'm offering a 1-for-1 here and a 1-for-1 here. But when it comes to a guy like Flowers or Coleman here, I think that you might have a hard time getting Bijan away from even offering Gibbs and Flowers, because knowing that we're so close to the drafts that we just experienced and Bijan was drafted ahead of Gibbs, I think this trade would be, I think that instead of targeting both Bijan and Keon Coleman, you might have to just target one of those guys and build from there. So say, for example, you offered Gibbs and Blake Corum, or Gibbs and Jalen Wright. I wouldn't offer Jalen Wright this week, or Gibbs and Mason for Bijan if you felt like that was a huge upgrade for your team, or Gibbs and Mason for Kyron. Seeing something like that, I like Mason this week. I think that he has another week where he could potentially match his totals. But also, we're all trying to trade out of Mason because we're not really sure what this CMC thing is going to do. So we want to get the maximum value. I think a way to do that isn't to do a 2-for-2, especially so close to the draft. You might be better able to do a 2-for-2 for Kyron because he was drafted much behind Bijan and behind Gibbs, and the guy who got Kyron might have wanted Gibbs. So you might be able to do something like that. But would I want Drake London? I wouldn't want Drake London. So if it was Gibbs and Flowers for Kyron and somebody else, I'd kind of spitball that a little bit more and see where it goes. Steve, I need to start 3 guys: Achane, Pacheco, Mason, or Ford. I just don't know what to do. If he does play, start Achane. Yeah. If Achane does play, I think he's a start. Because we know, even on limited reps, that he could be absolutely electric, even with the injury that he's dealing with. And I know that we had talked about this a little bit on Tuesday too, that if he starts, he's still a play. If it comes game time decision, and you're feeling iffy about that, I think the 3 guys that you have in the interim can also put up points this week. When we look at where do we have the other guys ranked on this list here, we have Pacheco going off as the number 6 ranked running back this week. We have Mason basically taking that slot of CMC against the Minnesota defense here. Minnesota does have, a decent-ish defensive front, but we don't know how decent it actually is because they just played the Giants. So we have Mason really high. So for me, if it's revealed that he's not going to play, I go Pacheco and Mason. If it's revealed that Achane is going to play, I go Achane and probably Pacheco. But again, Mason is ranked a little bit higher for us this week than Pacheco. So that's kind of that's kind of a hard deal for me to put in there. But I think that all three of them are going to have good games. Achane, Pacheco, and Mason. Ford, I think, is going to have a decent enough game too, but nothing higher. So yeah, that's how I fall. I'd do Achane and Pacheco, but also you could make a case for Achane and Mason, knowing that he could probably just really assume those CMC type numbers again this week. Jonathan, getting to your question, Senor, we're going to get to your question as well. Augusta, we are definitely going to get to your question, Amon, as well.
Well, all of your questions, guys. We're not neglecting anyone.
Tough choice. I have to sit one between Adams, Rushy, Rice, Ayuk, Devonta Smith. Hurts is my QB, but I'm still leaning Devonta Smith. I said Ayuk.
Yeah.
I said Ayuk, and when we look at our rankings for this week, and we look at where these players fall, Ayuk is one of the top players for us this week. But when it comes down to it, Rushy Rice is so good.
You can't sit. You can make an argument for sitting Smith. I get that. See, Ayuk also falls that category of major studs that didn't get the rock a lot last week and could easily go off.
And he stated, and I don't know how much stock I'm going to take into it because it's probably more so the fact that he didn't practice all summer. He stated he didn't feel right. He didn't feel right. Yeah. So I get it. We basically have a lot of San Francisco players ranked pretty high because their matchup against Minnesota is pretty good. But when it comes to a guy like Davante Adams here, we have Davante Adams ranked in that same conversation as Rashee Rice. So, I can make a case. I can make a case for you to start Rashee Rice, Ayuk, and Devonta Smith and bench Davante Adams. And I can also make a case that I would start bench Smith and play the other three. But I'm just not 1,000% sold on how involved Ayuk is going to be as a pass catcher this week, especially knowing that this is only like his second week of practices with the team. And the fact that Ayuk can throw up a turd every once in a while. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes off for 15, 16 points, PPR or higher. But at the same point in time, I think that there's a little bit more of a chance of a higher upside because it could be that, Baltimore starts blowing out the Raiders and they just start feeding either Myers or Adams. And then you get a bunch of garbage time happening there. Rashee Rice is going to see the rock a lot. And, when it comes to Devonta Smith, let me just take a look at our rankings. Knowing that he plays, knowing our rankings are just for the Sunday slate here, he's going to get a lot of work. And, he's not going to get locked down by A.J. Terrell or anything like that. And even then, George Pickens picked him apart, right, with Justin Fields. So that's how I fall. And I think, Joe, you're kind of on the same kind of bandwagon. But we can see definitely.
I love Devontae, but the math is the math, man.
Hey, Revan, welcome back. All right, let's get to Jonathan's second question, and then we'll go to Augusta here. Also sit one between Dobbins, Brian Robinson were the full point PPR first downs. I bench Brian Robinson. When I look at these two, when I look at all three of these players,
you have to.
Worthy, they're explicitly making plays for him. Granted, he might not see the field as, it might not be as many generic reps as the year goes on, or many gadget reps as the year go on, but he's an electric player. And, last week, Luke Wilson or Logan Wilson, I believe, for the Bengals was really one of the top IDPs on the week. And he was getting a lot of tackles up the middle. So, they were just like, that was because Stevenson was just going ham on the Bengals. And I love that term, by the way. I think that the way that this game's going to go is that Worthy's going to have definitely some production. He might not get those 2 touchdowns as he got last week, but I can definitely see a pathway for a touchdown, maybe 70, 80 all-purpose yards or higher. When I look at Dobbins came out of the woodwork last week. He was a guy that we were touting this year. Joe first, then I got on the bus because it was looking more and more like he would be their guy. 13 total kind of touches in that game, but he used them well, right? He used them very well. And now he's going on and facing one of the worst teams in football. So I don't think you can sit him. I don't think you can sit a guy coming off 136 yards going up against the worst team in football. I just don't think you can do it. So that leaves Brian Robinson out of the equation.
Well, the worst team in football is Carolina.
And where I yeah, and but where I stand on Brian Robinson is that the Giants are bad. And Brian Robinson is playing the Giants, but we saw that 27% of the time last week, Jane Daniels called his own number. And that's not what I like to see, especially in the 10-yard line. Yeah, Brian Robinson got a touchdown, but he only got like 40 yards and a touchdown. So for standard league, yeah, I kind of like Brian Robinson in standard league. He's been a full point PPR. I just don't see his value this week. Granted, he could end up popping off with something, but when we look at our rankings for these games this week, we have Dobbins ranked in the top 15. We have Worthy. Let me see where Worthy is. We have Worthy ranked, close to the top 50 in terms of wide receivers. So that's worthy of a flex.
Yeah, Worthy's obviously second on Kansas City.
And then when we look at where Brian Robinson is for the week, he is right a little bit above J.K. Dobbins, but that these rankings are taking into that the matchup and the surrounding.
Obviously, yeah, you have to take in the matchup. I mean, guys, let's be crazy about this.
So Augusto here, ETN for Flowers. My running backs are Hall, Kamara, Ford, and my wide receivers are Malik Neighbors, Godwin, London, and Rice. I don't do that.
I think I'd do it.
I don't think I'd do that.
I would.
When it comes down to it, and I don't think I'd do it because you got a kind of a better trade on the board here, I think. This is the other trade Augusto posted here.
That one's better.
Would you trade ETN and Ford for Taylor? I think I would do that. We talked about the impendingness of Anthony Richardson and a low volume offense that is extremely efficient. Where do we hear that before? We hear that in San Francisco. Who's been successful in San Francisco? CMC. So if this is a team that is going to be efficient, low volume, but efficient and electric. And when I talk about efficiency, I mean like Anthony Richardson willing to throw the ball 60 yards down the field. That's fine. Like, cool. Because you know what that does? That puts them closer to the red zone, which puts them closer into Jonathan Taylor territory. When it comes to ETN and Ford, yeah, it sucks giving up a guy like Ford. But when we look at what you're dealing with here, you have Hall and Kamara already. Now, while we're not like, I'm not going to speak ill of Kamara right now, but he's a PPR. He can be a PPR machine, and he's proved it in the past. Mm-hmm. So I'm fairly confident going out there and saying if I could go Hall and Jonathan Taylor as my two running backs, they're slated for volume. I mean, even with Anthony Richardson going off last week, Taylor still got around like 10, 12 points. Nothing great. But again, this is like the first week where they're working back Anthony Richardson back in. I'd do that because I think Flowers for me, what I would try to do if I was you, Augusto, is I'd try to move Neighbors or I'd try to move London. I would try to move one of those two guys and maybe Kamara to upgrade that wide receiver room because I don't think Flowers logistically upgrades you so much in terms of what you're getting there. RGQ, we'll get to your question in a moment as well. I want to get to Senor. So hopefully that helps, Augusto. Senor asks here, who would you start as a second flex, 12-team PPR, Ford or Keon Coleman? I like Keon Coleman this week. Our rankings are shown, don't really paint the picture for this night tonight. And there's some content creators just, because the uncertain production in the wide receiver room, where is it going to go? But I kind of like that uncertainty this week, right? You're looking for a second flex. Keon Coleman, 5 receptions last week, I believe.
Time out. If you're playing Coleman, you don't put him in the flex. You got to put him in the receiver. That's a rule of Thursday Night Football. You play him in their position, so you save the flex for the weekend.
Yeah, Senor, like Joe said, he is your second flex. But if you're going to play a player today, and you need that, and you should always keep that flexibility for the Sunday slate and for the Monday slate.
Because you never know with injuries.
Start him as your wide receiver 2. Put your wide receiver 2 in your second flex. Yeah. So if something were to happen, that you can easily flex. Thursday players should always go in your flex if possible.
Or never go in your flex.
Should never go in your flex when possible when it comes to Thursday night games if you have the ability to do that, right? when it comes to this week's games, when we look at Ford, and the reason why I'm a little bit down on Ford this week is just, Jacksonville defensive front in this game, right? This game was a weird game where, it started off, Jacksonville went out to a big lead, then, it didn't really pan out for them. And Tua was kind of trying to bite his way back into this game, and the rushing game was kind of non-existent at a certain point in time. And then both Mostert got hurt, and then Achane got hurt. So it's a tough to figure out if this game with Jacksonville is going to go Ford's way or not. We know that
it has to go Ford's way because
right,
they can't throw the ball.
We know that Deshaun Watson isn't good. So for me, I start Keon Coleman because I think there's going to be plenty more opportunities for him to be, I think Buffalo's a very good team, and I think Keon can definitely go for like 7 receptions, 80 yards in the second week with a possibility of a touchdown. For Ford, I think that Ford probably kind of normalizes himself a little bit, maybe like 60 yards and potentially a touchdown. So it's closer than a lot of people think. But I'm definitely going on the side of Keon Coleman. Joe, where do you fall on that?
I mean, it's hard to fight that. I mean, I like Coleman a lot. I honestly don't think that Jacksonville is going to let Cleveland do anything. It's not going to be as bad as the Dallas showing, but it's not going to be good either. I think that there's a very real chance that game script takes Ford out of the game. And by the way, I'll tell you guys all right now, they're about a mid-cost on DFS. Jacksonville is the defense I'm hitting the hardest right now as we're doing this. And the reason is that I have zero faith in Watson. He's only checking it down. And there is no way Jacksonville in their season opener is going to allow that patheticness that they did last week against Miami. They are going to blow out Cleveland.
So, like Senor said here, like we were saying, you have Kupp and Dell as your 1 and 2. What we encourage you to do is to put Kupp and Coleman as your 1-2. Throw Dell and Worthy into your flex in case some injury were to happen later on down the line. That's just a logistical standpoint. It has nothing to do with the player's value at all. It's just logistics.
It's Thursday night logistics, yeah.
Amon, we'll get to your question as well. Camden, we'll get to your question as well. Revan, we have not forgotten about you. We will get to your question as well. For tonight, thoughts on Jalen Wright and Jason Sanders? I think Jalen Wright is actually a really sneaky start.
I like it too.
Even if Achane is healthy, which we were saying earlier, if Achane's a go, you play Achane. But also Jeff Wilson is not that great. And he's serviceable. But even if Achane's going to need a break in this game, even if he plays, that is,
and he's probably going to play the slot more often than receiver. Actually, that's the thing.
I think George, that this is why we bought Jalen Wright, right? These are the circumstances because people are like, oh, well, Mostert's injury prone. I'm going to grab Jalen Wright. David Achane's injury prone. I'm going to grab Jalen Wright. You grab them for this week. So the question then would be for you, George, is that does he fit into your lineup well? Is he worth that? Is he worth that start over, whoever else you have in your lineup currently? I think he's worth a start this week, especially considering who they're playing this week. And the way that James Conner looked last week against Buffalo's defense as well. I think that Jalen Wright is a start. In regards to Jason Sanders, in terms of kickers, I think there's plenty of kickers out there.
Always are.
And when it comes to kickers on Thursday nights in certain past games have been field goal games. I think it's worthy to consider Jason Sanders, but I don't really think he's like a must start for tonight. Amon asks here, do you think Tank Bigsby has a chance to become the running back 1 in Jacksonville later in the year? I have him stashed on my bench. I don't know if he becomes the flat-out running back 1 because I still do believe that Travis Etienne is an extreme talent. But when we were talking with George on Tuesday and everybody else on Tuesday, Tank Bigsby is a definitive stash. And the way they used him, 12 carries, I believe, was 72, 73 yards. He's definitely useful. And he will be useful because Travis Etienne does tend to have lingering kind of injury concerns towards the back half of seasons. He might not play as well because he got a lot of volume. They're going to want to keep Travis Etienne pretty healthy. So Tank Bigsby is going to have a lot of usage this year, especially after he looked in that game, because he looked absolutely dreadful last year in his rookie season. This year, he, we were saying in the offseason, why are we believing in Tank Bigsby? Cool name, but not great player. But this year, he looks different. And so that's growth. And I like to see that. And the coaches like that. And they specifically said this offseason, with the coach speak, we're going to try to get both of these guys to rock. And what they did, they got both the guys to rock. They both got 12 carries. So that's a little bit more concerning for Travis Etienne. And, earlier we were talking about trading out of Travis Etienne into Jonathan Taylor, which I think is a better move. And I think Tank Bigsby definitely has a pathway to play in more games. So Augusta, this is the exact trade we were talking about. I think I would do that. Senior, I was also thinking about trading the CMC owner, Jordan Mason Kittle, for Kyron McBride. Thoughts? I love it. I love George Kittle. I love everything about the San Francisco offense. But I also love Kyron Williams. And despite McBride having a down week last week, all the tight ends in the league basically had a down week last week. The one knock on Kyron Williams, and we can talk about this in the chat too. Steve, we'll get to that question. We can talk about that in the chat too, is that basically almost every single player on the Rams offensive line is hurt.
Well, so the two most important, the starting left tackle and the center. So it's like kind of a big deal.
That's something to be concerned about with Kyron, but it's not anything to be concerned about with Kyron himself, because he's proven that he's a really good player. And
I'm not worried about what Cup either, though. See, here's the thing. I honestly think that McVay is smart enough to figure out a way to make it work. Sure. I mean, if you're betting on paper, does the run go to the left or the right for Kyron's touchdown? Obviously, you're going to pick the right.
Hey, Chan,
but I don't know
your question.
I honestly just believe in McVay that much.
Now, to your point, Senor, I don't think the owner's going to accept this trade because Jordan Mason is valuable, but I don't think he's as valuable as Kyron Williams. And when CMC comes back, CMC and Kyron will be good. I think you're going to have to offer a little bit more, or you're going to have to take out McBride.
Because here's the thing, you're selling names. I believe in Kittle more than McBride, but no one else does. So when you're selling people who are perceived less, you're not going to get it. That's why I would rather ride out and get the most you can out of Mason and just wait for McCaffrey to get hurt again. It's a soft tissue injury. He's going to basically come back a little bit, be gone a little bit. It's going to happen all year. I think you get more value sitting on Mason and trading him in the week 8 in the second go around of his hurt.
So to your question
on that answer, no, I don't think McCaffrey.
I don't think he plays this week, especially because they're in it to win Super Bowls. They're not in it to win. They're not in it to win us fantasy championships.
And they don't need to win in September to get to the Super Bowl. They know that.
If CMC is injured and, Jordan Mason looked good last week, if he would have looked like trash, they might have considered it.
That's right. But
he didn't. So I don't think he plays this week, and he might not even play next week, but we'll see what that injury comes through as. Najee or Ridley this week? Najee, Revin.
Yeah.
The Broncos are not good again. And it like kind of pains me to say that because like 3 years ago I was like, oh, they might be good, but they're not good again.
That's right.
And even with Warren coming back, and we saw what Kenny Walker did, we saw what Zach Charbonnet did last week. Both of them had value, so I do feel like Najee and Jaylen Warren will have a lot of value this week. Ridley, we were just talking about that with Amon up there. Ridley got looks, and if he's not, they're playing the Jets. And again, the Jets the defensive front maybe isn't that great. That's why Jordan Mason did as well as he did. But the back half is not like terrible, right? He's probably going to draw Sauce Gardner. And we'll see what Calvin Ridley can do. But I think Najee is the safer matchup and the better matchup. RGQ. Pittman and Coleman from Mike Evans, think it'll get accepted. I think that absolutely will get accepted. Would I do it? I love Mike Evans, but I also like Keon Coleman. I would try first to just try to do like a Pittman and just say, hey, I'm interested in trading Pittman. Are you interested? I'm interested in Mike Evans. You interested? What would you like for my team? And if they say, oh, make an offer, do like Pittman and maybe like a wide receiver 4-5 maybe from your team, and then see if they might want to work their way up to Coleman. I wouldn't offer that straight off the gate right away because
it is probably where you end up though.
I think that's the end point. I think that will get accepted. I don't like Pittman, like we were talking about the other day, RGQ, and I love Mike Evans, but that is a reasonable trade. If anybody's watching right now and wants to see what a reasonable trade looks like, that's what a reasonable trade looks like. A rookie, a wide receiver 4, potential wide receiver 3, for a wide receiver 2, potential wide receiver 1, for an undisputed wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 kind of thing. I think that's the makings of a good trade. I think that will get accepted, but I would try to offer a little bit less to start with and then work my way up. Should I try to move forward? I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to move forward, but if Ford's one of those pieces that can absolutely upgrade your team to the maximum value that it can have.
You shouldn't move all 3 of them. You only move 2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should not do all 3 for Evans. If you're getting something in return in addition to Evans, maybe.
Camden, we'll get to your question as well. We're actually going to get to your question right now. Start 2, Ramondre, Dobbins, Waddle, Pittman. For our rankings, if we were to go through our rankings right here, we have Waddle. It would be Waddle and Dobbins for us.
Unless you're afraid of the Thursday night thing, which I get. Make sure you because Waddle is battling a little bit of something. It feels like every single week we say Waddle's battling a little bit of something. But the other part is this might be New England's last chance of winning, and this might be the last time to play Ramondre.
Yeah,
so there is that.
And to RGQ, to we talked a little bit about your team with Michael Pittman, and we said that we like Flowers and Coleman more because we have them ranked ahead. But in this circumstance, they're playing Green Bay, and like I told Joe, Green Bay that offense is going to sputter a lot, and Indy's going to be on the field a lot, which means that could work out really well for Jonathan Taylor, or that could work out really well for Pittman. So if you had hesitation, Camden, about tonight's game in the slightest, or Waddle's injuries in the slightest, I would pivot to a Dobbins Pittman, or pivot to the Dobbins Ramondre. I think that we have them pretty much at the same value across the weeks. I think that either way is kind of dealer's choice on that one. With Ramondre, like you said, with the Pats here, I'd be a little bit more hesitant with Ramondre because we did see that Denver, being terrible as they did last week, they didn't really get a lot of things going on the ground. So if I were to pivot away from Waddle because of the injury concern, because of Thursday night, maybe not getting enough rest, then I'd pivot to Dobbins and Pittman. So let's get to Chandler's question here, and then we'll get a little bit later on down in here. Trade Olave for King Henry? Yes, absolutely, 1,000%.
Yes.
Can't say that enough. Chandler, absolutely yes. Your running backs are Zeke, Ford, Mostert, CMC, and Javonte, so you're dealing with a couple of injuries here. With Debo, Evans, Rice, and Waddle, you have no need for Olave. Olave's your flex. And if you can upgrade your starting running back 2 and don't even have to worry about the flex position there, especially with a guy like Waddle and Zeke, I'm 1,000% on King Henry bus. If you watched us over the summer at all, we are definitely on the King Henry bus. But also, this is something that other content creators have mentioned as well. They're not going to be playing the Chiefs every week. Their matchups are not going to be terrible every week. So when you look at this matchup for King Henry, yes, he got a touchdown. Yes, he only got like 40 to 60 yards or whatever. But Olave did that too against the worst team in the league. So I am on King Henry more than I'm on Olave. I'd say do the trade.
You're mostly off Olave. Let's just be honest there.
So 10 minutes ago, news says he's at practice and participating. New news. That is new news about.
Well, no, it's not new news because he was a limited participant. McCaffrey was a limited participant in every single practice last week.
RTQ, I see that. We'll definitely get to that.
They listed so San Francisco's actually getting fined right now for manipulating those reports because they said he was a participant in practice every single day last week, despite the fact that the running back in the post-game interviews said he knew he was the starter on Friday. This is what San Francisco's doing to lie. Do not bank on McCaffrey playing.
So
keep it ready in case it was a spot. Thankfully, they're not the last game of the week, but this is not new news. This San Francisco's been lying.
So Camden,
John Lynch.
while Camden was just talking to us about Pittman, so he obviously can't start Pittman now. Just traded him straight up for DK Metcalf. That's great.
Yes,
DK is going to get a lot of volume this year. Gino, for all of his things that he lacks, he does not lack trying to get DK Metcalf the ball. So I like that. You're welcome, Senior, for the perspective there. So it's Waddle, DK. It would be Waddle, DK, Ramondre, or Dobbins this week. So let's go back here and look at our rankings here. DK for us is a top 10 wide receiver this week. So for us, for me, instead of Waddle, I guess it would be DK and Dobbins. So knowing what we have going on here now, I think that I'm on DK and Dobbins right now, Joe, ahead of Waddle.
Again, hard to fight that.
So Jackson, should I do King Henry, Kenny Walker, and Zay Flowers for Kyron Williams, Drake London, Dak Prescott, 10-team PPR? I have decent running back depth, but I'm not sure this is a good trade. You have Achane, Kenny Walker, King Henry, Javonte Williams, Jalen Wright, Mason, Lamb, Olave, Flowers, Coleman, Kincaid, and Hawkinson. Hold on here. And anybody in the chat right now can kind of respond to this as well, which would be really helpful for Jackson here. So do I trade Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, or Kenny Walker and Zay Flowers for Kyron Williams? Zay Flowers? Who's your quarterback, Jackson? Because I don't do that. And here's why. When you look at your depth, you do have depth, and I'm assuming you can start 2 running backs, and you probably have 1 flex. You're probably starting 3 wide receivers and a tight end. Your QB is Jane Daniels right now. If it were me, and this might sound, and if you tuned in on Tuesday, this might sound counterproductive for most parts, but I think I'd actually trade Jane Daniels. So if you don't really need Dak, but if you have Jane Daniels, and you're worried about his production, I would kind of try to float some offers. Instead of giving up both Ken Walker and Derrick Henry, maybe float some offers out there with Jane Daniels in it. I don't think Drake London is worth owning right now at this point in the season. Cousins looks really hurt, really, really hurt. If this were like 5-6 years ago, he probably still wouldn't even be playing. So that's a concern for me also, Jackson. So this trade basically is giving up a lot for Kyron Williams, and I don't think this is a good trade. I do not think it's a good trade at all, but I think it's a trade that you can work around. If the interested owner wants to give up Kyron Williams, I might counter the Kyron trade and say, okay, Ken Walker and Zay Flowers or something like that. I wouldn't even give up that much, but definitely maybe even Ken Walker and Olave for Kyron Williams. See how that goes. I think that you can definitely build something out of that. Do I think that they put Ramsey on Coleman? With the way that this team works, with the way that Buffalo's working, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're going to shadow Coleman at all. They definitely probably will put they will put Ramsey on Coleman most likely a bit. I'm just kind of going back in here and looking up the wide receiver cornerback matchups for week 2 here. And when we get to this idea here of shadowing, Keon Coleman, will probably face Fuller a lot. Will probably face Jalen Ramsey a decent amount as well. I just don't see how that, negatively affects Coleman really. And there's a good chance that they might try to get Shakir locked down so they don't get something loose over the top. So, I could definitely see them doing that, but I don't think it's going to be all game. Maybe like 30%, 40% of the game, but I don't think it will be all game. This is absolutely a pretty decent bench RGQ with Reed, Hollywood, and Coleman. So should I trade Worthy and Flowers for DJ Moore? I don't think so. I don't do that, especially in PPR. Flowers in standard is a little bit of a tougher sell, but for me, in terms of what we're getting out of Caleb Williams, we haven't seen enough out of Caleb Williams for me to want to go after DJ Moore. If you're trading out of DJ Moore, we talked about trading out of DJ Moore and what that could look like on Tuesday. But I'm not trading into DJ Moore right now. And I know you'd be buying DJ Moore at a low value, but I think that Worthy and Flowers have a lot of value in PPR leagues, particularly Flowers. On a week-to-week basis, Flowers should improve. They made a concerted effort to get Flowers the ball last week. They made likely a concerted effort to get the ball last week. I just think I don't do this. I would try to, if I wanted DJ Moore, I'd offer a little bit less. So RGQ, back to your trade question here. When we were looking at Pittman and Coleman for Mike Evans, the Mike Evans owner has Debo, Diggs, Kirk, and Ladd, Mixon, Singletary, and Mostert. If I was trading out like you are talking about trading out of Pittman and Coleman, I might counter that for Mike Evans and Ladd McConkey. I would try to see if I can work a 2v2 on that, because I think that Ladd, we have Keon Coleman having a lot of value this year, but we're also having Ladd have a lot of value this week and beyond. So if I were trading out of it, I think that, with your team, with your bench, I think that right now Hollywood Brown is good enough. But, we'll see where that kind of shakes down. But I think if you wanted to move on from Coleman and gain Mike Evans to get that stability from Mike Evans and trade out of Pittman, I'd ask for Ladd back. It can't hurt. All the person can do is just basically say no. So Jackson, you're starting 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, and a tight end. So when we look at your team, you'd be going from starting you'd be starting Achane and Kyron, and then playing Lamb, Olave, and then Coleman would be your flex. I think you're in a better position right now without doing that trade than doing that trade and getting Kyron Williams. Even though I love Kyler, anybody who was watching the other day, don't get rid of Zay Flowers in PPR. He's definitely going to improve. If I added Chase Brown to that Kyron trade, is it too much? I don't think adding Chase Brown is right now. I think people are a little bit lower on him. I think it couldn't hurt. So Jordan Mason, Chase Brown, and Kittle for Kyron and McBride. You can try. You can absolutely 1,000% try that trade. But what I would be cautious of is that person who the CMC owner knows what you're trying to do. The CMC owner knows you're trying to buy Kyron low because they're in trouble. And what I would caution against is I would make it a little bit more of a reasonable offer, Senor. I would, I would put Jordan Mason, Kittle, and like you said, Chase Brown. And if I did that and they came back and they said, okay, Jordan Mason and Kittle for Kyron, I would even consider something like that as well. Just know you might not get McBride. You might not get that positional back. So have like something on that back end. If you trade away Kittle and you can't get McBride, you might want to have something down the pipeline for yourself to kind of protect you there at tight end. Coming to the next one here. Yeah, RGQ, Kenny Walker's nice. Even hurt, Ken Walker's nice. I was surprised when I watched an interview with him, when the post-game interview. I didn't know he sounded like that, which was a little bit surprising. So let me ask the big one here. I have Gibbs, Dobbins, Chase, Nico, and DK at flex with Waddle and Ramondre on the bench. I think that's fine. I definitely think that having Gibbs, Dobbins, Chase, and Nico playing and DK there at the flex, I think it's fine having Waddle and Ramondre on the bench. I know it's scary because Ramondre put up 21 points last week, and I know that Waddle, got hurt in the middle of the game and could easily put up, 20, 18 to 20 points this week. But looking at that lineup, I think that if I were to take anybody out, I would consider taking out maybe Jamar, but that's like sacrilege. So, keeping your roster as it is, I think that starting positions, and again, check in with players on Sunday and Saturday to see what any injuries coming in. But I think that's solid. I really think that's solid. You're welcome, Jackson. So Jackson has, he has Amon-Ra, so I might try to do Ken Walker and Henry for Amon-Ra. I think that's a lot, but I think that's kind of more logistically, it's a lot to give up. And I don't think I'd give up that much, even though I love Amon-Ra and our rankings love Amon-Ra. But I think that's more reasonable, right? Giving up 2 RB2s, potential RB1s for one undeniable wide receiver one. That's the kind of deal that people are afraid to make. But if you have that type of depth right now, that's the type of deal that could win you a league. So that's definitely something to consider. I would be nervous. Though, because Javonte Williams isn't depth right now. We talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. Javonte Williams looked real bad. And Jaleel McLaughlin is there, and yeah, Camden, definitely check that constantly, because when players get sick and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I think that we look here. Jay, we'll talk about that in a moment. Jackson, when it comes to your running back depth, let's go back there and we can kind of chat about this as a group too. Is Jalen Wright? This is it's great here for what it is, but you're giving up a lot to try to upgrade that position. And what I'm trying to communicate to you is something like Lamb and Flowers are perfectly fine as a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 combination. So then you're searching yourself for a flex, because I think right now what you have is what your team probably looks like on a week to week basis. If you were to start all these guys, would be Achane and Walker would be your RB1, RB2. Lamb and Flowers would be your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Then your flex, from what I see from you, one flex would probably be a decision between Derrick Henry and Olave on a week-to-week basis, right? Maybe it's between Flowers and Olave on a week-to-week basis, or Coleman, Olave, and Henry on a week-to-week basis, and then Kincaid. So if I were me, I would not give up Ken Walker and Henry unless a great deal popped up. Because here's the thing: what I'm communicating to you, Jackson, is that once you do that trade for Amon-Ra, Olave basically becomes nothing to you, because you have one flex position, and then you're going to be deciding basically on a weekly basis: do I start Olave, Flowers, or Coleman? And Coleman's, I think Coleman right now is going to have decent value. Flowers already has decent value in PPR. If you go out there and get Amon-Ra, I don't think you can give up both of those running backs. I think a better trade for you would be to say, I don't want to trade away Derrick Henry right now, but if I could get Amon-Ra, I'd go Henry and Olave for Amon-Ra. I don't make my team any weaker, and I upgrade my wide receiver 2 dramatically without decreasing the value of my running back 2. That's kind of my viewpoint on that trade, Jackson. I think that, as we talk in the chat, here, I think that that's definitely the move here. Henry and Walker and Olave definitely is a better trade out into Amon-Ra. And it's great. And that owner's he's going to consider it. That owner is going to consider that, because that's actually a very good trade to put together for a guy.
And if the choice is between keeping Henry or Walker, I'd personally want to keep Henry.
And that's fair enough. Yeah, I will get to that RGQ for sure, because I know you love the Pats. You think if Mike Evans' owner wants a running back since RB2 was Mostert, should I do Pittman, Coleman, Ford for Evans, Ladd, Singletary just to have a starting running back on the bench? I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair enough.
I would love to do that trade. That's a great trade.
I think that both sides are getting value to the degree that, you're taking on Evans's age, but you're also getting back Evans's touchdown production. With Pittman, you have that week-to-week uncertainty with Anthony Richardson, but you also have a young player who is very good.
Evans is the best player in that trade.
Coleman and Ladd for us right now. We have Coleman ranked a little bit higher than Ladd right now, but they
keep fluctuating. That's a week-to-week matchup thing. They're basically the same guy.
Basis. And then you're taking Ford. You're taking the downgrade on Singletary, but you're
upgrading so much on Evans.
You're upgrading I think that's on Evans. I think that's really logistically a really good trade, RGQ. If Pittman doesn't have
also RGQ on that last point, that's strictly dealers' feelings about Ladd or Coleman, whichever one you feel higher up on moving forward. We love Ladd because there's no competition. Coleman obviously has a crowded room.
So Jay, if Pittman doesn't have a good week 2 that justifies his ADP, he will be going to my bench until further notice. I agree. Is this a good take? Yeah. I look at AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Del McLaurin, Pittman at wide receiver. If you're starting 3 wide receivers on a week-to-week basis, I'm taking. Honestly, I know it's probably not the right choice on a week-to-week basis, but if I'm starting 3 wide receivers, Dell is always going to be in my lineup regardless.
Yeah, that is the right choice.
Regardless of what it is, because he's on one of the best, most explosive offenses in the league from a standpoint that getting down the field. Yes, his value takes a hit because Diggs looks like he's a red zone guy, But with Garrett Wilson, Joe, we're not going to talk in depth on Garrett Wilson right now.
Well, what I would do if I were you, Jay, is I would make my life easier. I would combine Wilson, but he doesn't want me to go into it. But I would combine Pittman and one of the other 4 and go for Lamb or Amah. That way you have, because you only start 3 and you have 1 flex. You don't need 5 of them. So upgrade, like I said, Pittman and one of the other 4 to go for a significant upgrade that would be in your starter. And I think that you could get the argument of Wilson and Pittman for Lamar, or for Amah rather, or Lamb. And I would try to push that, because then you have less debates every time. Sure, you have a little bit of depth issue, but the issue is you're going to be winning a whole lot of games, and if they don't get hurt, you won the championship.
Amon, would you make any moves with my team? Hurts, Kelsey, Rashad, Mostert, Singletary, Bucky Irving, Bigsby, Hill, Flowers, Ladd, Ridley, Cooks, Dortch. If I were you, Amon, I would try to find somebody to take on Ridley. And maybe I'd have to pair Ridley with Rashad White. And because Rashad White, you have Bucky Irving in the back pocket there. You have Tank Bigsby there. If I were you, I'd maybe try to look at something like Ridley and Rashad White and try to upgrade. You won't be able to get Mixon right now because he had a great week. But you could try to maybe start targeting guys. Maybe you could do a 2 for 2.
See, maybe you do an outright Rashad White for Monty. That would be a significant upgrade.
What I would do is I would even consider Ridley and Rashad for Derrick Henry.
That's fine. But dude, I got a double trade for you. These are going to be 2 separate trades you're going to have to do here, but I think you can get both of them essentially straight up. You got to trust me that you're going to start Cooks and it's going to work out to do this. I would do White straight up for Monty because I think you can get that. And then I would do Ridley for Reed because the owner of Reed is going to shit a brick after he does nothing this week. And he is going to be such a valuable asset later in the year. So I'm telling you guys this, all of you guys out there, target Reed after this week because everything Bob said earlier in the show about Malik Willis being horrible is true. And you'll be able to get Ridley. You'll be able to get Reed for 3 rounds lower than what he was drafted at for the equivalent trade bait. And it will be a perfect stash to carry you through late October and through your playoff run when Love comes back.
What I think too when it comes to trades is that when people go 0-2, they're more likely, even if they don't say it, they're more likely to start trading. When people are 1-1 or 1-0, it's a little bit more difficult. RGQ, I'm not disagreeing with you that I think Ramondre Stevenson could have a good year on a good game this week against Seattle, but the Chargers are playing Carolina, and Carolina is bad. We saw that this week. We saw that game is probably that game could probably get to the point where they're just going to be running the clock out just so it's over quick, because that game is probably going to be one of the grossest games for Sunday. And when it turns to that, I think that there's going to be a lot of value in J.K. Dobbins. And that's one of the only reasons. Again, we have Ramondre Stevenson ranked, decently high enough that, it could be a really good week for him. But what we saw from J.K. Dobbins last week is a little bit more in the vein of let's get J.K. Dobbins the ball a little bit more because he looks good. Yeah, I see there, and there's a lack of running. So, yeah, probably going to have to turn Flowers or Olave into a great run. Absolutely. Could I use Ramondre a good week with DK or Waddle to move up a tier? I think so. If Ramondre ends up having a good week this week, like RGQ said, RGQ's a Pats fan. When you consider what Ramondre could do, if Ramondre puts together 2 20-point weeks, there's 2 ways to look at it, right? If Ramondre is able to put up 2 20-point weeks against teams that were supposedly having decent enough defenses.
No, Cincinnati does not have a good run defense. That's a lie.
I said good enough. I didn't say
no. They're not good enough. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They're not.
If you look at it and you say, okay, if he puts up a 20-point week against Cincinnati, then another 20-point week against Seattle, it might be enough to say, okay, hold Ramondre Stevenson in the vein that RGQ was saying, as potentially being a top 10 running back by sheer volume by the year's end. But as the season starts to get nitty gritty, we'll really see what Ramondre Stevenson and the Pats are made out of. And I really think that you could use Ramondre and Waddle if Ramondre has a really good week to seriously upgrade your team. You could even move up a tier. You might be even able to target a guy like Bijan as well. If Bijan produces another like 16-point week, you could definitely start to target guys like that. If Ramondre, I mean, you drafted Ramondre probably in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, somewhere in around there, maybe even a 5th round. I think there's a lot of flexibility with Ramondre because he's playing well. He played well, and that's really good to see. We'll get to that RGQ in a moment, Revan and Steve. Robbie Chosen playing tonight for the Dolphins. That is disgusting.
He's not going to do anything. Don't
I
worry about
thought they benched him. Or I thought
they did.
Anyway,
Waddle's dealing with something, and Mostert's out. They got to put another player out there. Could this finally be the week that Jonnu Smith shows up?
I hope so. Maybe. When we look at Kev's team here, 10-team, half PPR, 2 flex. CMC owner offered me Tank Dell for Mason. Oh. My receivers are London, Olave, Devonta Smith, Godwin, Myers, Demarcus Robinson, Breece Hall, Monty, Brian Robinson Jr. Yeah, I do that. Yes. And then here's what I would think about doing, right, is that you've got Bijan, or you got Breece and Monty. If you trade, so here's the thing about Mason. I think that Mason, like we said, Mason is going to assume CMC kind of numbers until CMC comes back. We were talking on Tuesday. George Plays mentioned this to us, just a thought that he had that, even when CMC comes back, we could start seeing a 70-30 or an 80-20 type of split on a week-to-week basis, especially if a game gets out of hand. See if they're going to want to keep CMC healthy. So Mason will have, and this is kind of what I equated with like the Zach Moss last year, is that Zach Moss blew up for like 4 or 5 games when Taylor went down. And, if you didn't trade Moss early, you were just riding the wave of Moss, and it felt good. But then when Taylor came back, it was basically a nothing for you. Even though Taylor was hurt, Moss kind of didn't really even see the field. He wasn't worth it anymore, but you had to keep him on your roster just in case Taylor were to get hurt again. I feel like that's the same thing with Jordan Mason. We've never seen Jordan Mason really do this before. He hasn't really gotten the opportunity to do this before. So if he's assuming these carries behind a really good offensive line, we have to at least assume week 2 that he could do it again against a team that maybe isn't as good as what they faced in week 1. So what I'm saying here is that, like, if Jordan Mason has a good week this week and CMC doesn't play, you aren't going to be able to trade Mason for Dell, because by week 3 and week 4, we're going to know if CMC is going to be back. And Jordan Mason won't return a 21-point value on a week-to-week basis once CMC comes back. He might return a 10-point. He might return 9, which is, good enough for like a low-end flex. But Tank has the chance to put up 23 points a game, and you know that he's going to be a weekly starter and he's going to have a role. As it fits into your lineup, getting Dell would allow you to move on from a guy like Godwin or Olave, pairing up a guy like Godwin or Olave with Brian Robinson Jr. and trying to move up a second tier, moving up a tier maybe in a wide receiver, or moving up a little bit in terms of a third running back. I definitely think that there's room for growth on your team, especially considering there's 2 flexes, right? So if I'm looking at this if you're starting 3 wide receivers with 2 flexes, you're doing London, Olave, Devonta Smith, and then your 2 flexes are most likely this week, especially if it's half PPR, Tank Dell and Chris Godwin. I don't think that's anything to scoff at, but again, I didn't buy into the NFC South wide receivers this year. I got burned by them so hard, and the historical stats back it up. If you didn't tune in at the beginning of the show, I'm going to say it again, and I can put socks in my mouth if he becomes a true top 10 wide receiver. But Chris Olave in his career has been 50% top 24, 50% below top 24. Only 30% of the time has he been a top 15 wide receiver, and he has never had a top 5 finish, period. With Derek Carr, his highest point total was 23 points, which that was the week that Amari Cooper put up 51 points. You take that out and you normalize those stats, he came 10th, and that was his best week when Carr was throwing the ball 40 times. If you think Carr is going to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game, fine. By all means, keep Olave, right? But if you think If you think that Olave, if you think they want to win football games, and if they want to win football games, Derek Carr's not going to be able to throw the ball 40 times. That's not how you win a football game when you're Derek Carr. That's how you lose a football game when you're Derek Carr. So in terms of the trade, did I send it right now or should I wait? Ayuk owner only has 4 wide receivers in our 3 wide receiver league. If Pittman does good and Coleman, I could trade 2 for Ayuk. I think if I'm going into this week, I think because Pittman against Indy is probably a start in some regards. We were talking earlier about that from your perspective, RGQ, and we mentioned that, your team is pretty solid without starting Pittman. You can go ahead and do the trade this week, but I think that Pittman's going to have a better game this week, which will probably up his trade value a little bit more. And that could definitely improve your chances of getting a guy like Mike Evans. But again, when we look at the rankings for this week and we look at, what wide receivers that we have ranked, pretty high, we're looking at Mike Evans as our 5th best wide receiver this week. So I would go out and I would do it now. You can wait, but I would do it now because I do like Mike Evans's matchup this week. But if you're hesitant on it, by all means, you can wait a little bit and see where the sun takes you this week. Then maybe Ford for Singletary and Ladd with the Mike Evans owner. Yeah, I think don't sell Ford so low because he does have a lot of value right now, and you might be able to snake Ladd and Singletary just for Ford himself if people do not believe that Ladd's production is sustainable. So I'd try this offer right here. Yeah, RGQ, you're absolutely right. Few catches, 70 yards and touchdown, boom, 20-point game. Absolutely agree with that. But I want to see it more often because, let's see how he does as this schedule wears on and how these defenses react to Jacoby Brissett, Drake May, the quarterback combination there as well. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he can throw up a 20-point game this week at all. But I'm just a little bit hesitant. Hold Chiefs D or swap out for Seattle Jags Colts for a better matchup. Colts, dude. Colts. I think that the Chiefs D against the Bengals is a fantastic play. They looked really, really good against Lamar and the Bengals. Chandler Jones got a lot of pressure. But again, Malik Willis sucks. The Colts
cannot overstate that.
The Colts have a good enough defense. It's not that bad. If your defense scores sacks, I still hold the Chiefs. Okay? Because Burrow with the hand probably gonna not be upright so much in that game. Mm-hmm. However, the Colts, I believe what's the Colts offense or defensive line look like here, Joe, in terms of
I like their defensive center. I like DeForest. I like Grover. Okay. Like I said, it's top 10. I mean, their interior, their defensive line. Yeah.
There's sacks possible. Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, both questionable. Grover, EJ Speed, Zaire Franklin, both good linebackers. Malik Willis is in trouble tonight.
Yeah, that's an easy way of putting it.
The only thing kind of keeping them, maybe is that offensive line. But I would play the Colts. But just know that Chandler Jones is probably going to get a couple sacks, so it depends on your scoring here. Hey, Marlon, what's up? Good to have you back. Robbie Chosen's playing tonight. We just talked about that. It's just a little weird, especially when we're considering Waddle. So there's a lot of injury things happening with the Dolphins. Hopefully they can get that sorted out. So if you're hesitant on Waddle tonight, Robbie Chosen isn't going to keep me away from Waddle, but it's definitely interesting to think about. Full PPR, Connor, Ford or Kirk. That's a tough one.
I let me hit this one.
Hold on.
This goes back to something I said earlier today. I'm very hard on Christian Kirk over Ford. 2 reasons. First, Christian Kirk is in this category of number 1 receivers that didn't get the target share they should have in week 1. That almost always balances itself out the following week. He's in the same category as Amon in that department. So I think that he's going to get a lot of love. The other part is I thoroughly believe Jacksonville's going to blow the fuck out of Cleveland. I mean, there's no way around that. And when you look at that and go, oh, well, that's the end of it. You're not going to run the ball when you keep throwing the ball for 2.3 air yards, which is what Watson's doing. Everyone's in the box. There's nothing open in Cleveland's offense to be able to make it work. So to me, that's a no-brainer. Christian Kirk, I'm not saying he's getting 100 yards and 6 touchdowns, but I am saying he's significantly going to outscore Ford by at least 6 points.
Well, the only thing working in Ford's favor during this week is that he did get 7 targets last week, and there's a good reason, because Deshaun Watson's not able to throw the ball downfield. So and Njoku's out, so there's a lot to say that Ford could be a very good play this week because Njoku's injury, but I don't know if that's going to materialize into a lot of yards because the defensive line for the Jaguars is aggressive enough. And that could be definitely, a yardage problem for Ford. So while the targets will be there, I'm not sure the yards will completely be there for him. He could definitely light it up. If he ends up breaking one and getting a touchdown, he's obviously going to outscore Kirk. But that's the thing that we have.
I don't think it's obvious. I think Kirk scored a touchdown. So
should I panic? AZ Smitty, welcome. Ryan, welcome. Snags, welcome. Steve, we'll get to that. RGQ, definitely we'll get back to that. Should I panic on Ayuk? No. I would not panic on Ayuk. Yes. I said earlier in the broadcast that Ayuk definitely said that he doesn't feel right. But obviously, I'm not going to feel right either if I haven't done what my job was for 5 consecutive months, 6 consecutive months, if I hadn't been practicing in the off season, if I hadn't been going and practicing during like spring camps, whatever, after the drafts, whatever. I wouldn't panic on Ayuk yet, but I will communicate that it's probably going to take a week, 2, maybe 3 weeks for him to kind of get going again. And he's always likely to throw up a dud. So I'm kind of concerned. I'm concerned about it there, but I'm not panicking on him yet. What are your best projected players for the whole year? At this moment in time, when we look back at some of our rankings, some of the projectable players that we are really big fans of, one of them being Derrick Henry, maybe not our best projectable player, but the touchdowns are going to be there. And if he lights up, like we were saying about Ramondre Stevenson, if he happens to, Derrick Henry's not going to get a lot of catches right now on Baltimore. No. However, if he's able to get 14 touchdowns and 900 to 1,000 yards, that's money in the bank right there. I mean, Raheem Mostert ended up getting 18 touchdowns or 21 touchdowns, something like that, through the air and on the ground. And he was running back, 2, 5, something like that on the year last year. I think Derrick Henry is one of our higher projectable players. We have Amon-Ra, even though he had a down week. He's one of our higher projectable players over the course of the year. And then one of the other guys that, we both like that it was down low, lower in drafts, is David Montgomery. David Montgomery is going to get the work. And the split and we were talking with George Plays about this as well. The split between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is still around 50%. It's like 51% to 49%. But this isn't a offense that's like, all right, we're going to take you out when you're doing well. If you're doing well, they're going to keep you in. If you're tired and you need a break, they're going to take you out. If it's your drive, they're going to keep you in. If it's not your drive, they're not going to all of a sudden put you in on the goal line. That's not the way Dan Campbell works. Dan Campbell wants to win games. And if he sees a player doing really well, and this is just like the coaching dynamic, right? Is same with Mike McDaniel. He's going to give his players the best chance to win the game. So if Jahmyr Gibbs is the best chance to win the game, then Jahmyr Gibbs is the best chance to win the game. But why I say Monty is one of our higher projectable players is because volume isn't a concern. We know a floor of volume from Monty. We also know that there is like almost, if Gibbs were to go down, an infinite ceiling in this offense. So, Monty for us is one of the lower players that we have projected as a potential top 5 finisher on the season. And I know that's weird for us to say. But again, got to take that all in with the perspective of the team. So start Goff, Tua, or Fields. Let's take a look at our rankings. For the Sunday slate, we have Goff.
It's Tua. I mean, the answer is Tua. We're projecting Tua to score like crazy tonight. We just don't have him for the Sunday slate.
Yeah. For the Sunday slate, we have Goff rated fairly high, top 5 potential there. But it's Tua all the way. Tua
Yeah.
all the way for us, especially this week. I traded DK Metcalf for Drake London. What do you think, Snags?
Ugh.
We don't like Drake London. There's a lot of metrics and a lot of content creators that are pushing Drake London as a buy low, pushing Drake London this, pushing Drake London this. The problem with Drake London is one of the
Quarterbacks hurt.
One of the biggest knocks on Drake London going. If you would have asked me last season, I love Drake London as a player. I think he's a great player, and I think Olave is a great player. From just a strictly football kind of standpoint, they do a lot of things for the team. But when I'm looking at a fantasy player, Drake London I believe, hasn't been over 900 yards yet in any of the seasons he's been with. He's been with terrible quarterbacks, and he's now with a quarterback that just looks in pain all the time. Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I also want to point this out too.
Time.
And I just want to throw this out here. You guys think about this for a minute. The argument for why
Ryan,
people want London
question?
was that
Marlon, Sergio, we'll get to all those. Hey, Bryce, how's it going? We'll get to that.
The reason people wanted London was that he always had passes thrown his way. They were just horrible passes and no one could catch them. There was the argument for London and Pitts. Well, there's a certain reality at a certain point is if you're good, you get open. I mean, it's just the way we've seen horrible receivers or really good receivers start with horrible quarterback play early in their career, and they fight themselves out of it into becoming a great receiver. It's what happens. You could really make an argument that Kirk Cousins was nowhere near as good as he is during J.Jeff's rookie year. J.Jeff elevated him. A great receiver will elevate a quarterback. London doesn't have that at all. Olave certainly doesn't have that. And when you look at it and go, there's a reason the ball is getting thrown so high. It's because you're not open enough. You know, you look at this like DJ Moore never had a good quarterback. He's put up good fantasy numbers, but people are talking like London is so much better of a player than DJ Moore. He's not.
Yeah, DJ Moore's better. And to that degree that you're saying that good receivers elevate their quarterbacks is I think at some point in time this season DJ Moore will be okay-ish. But he looked good in Carolina.
Because at some point they're going to play Carolina.
Yeah, he looked good again in Carolina when it didn't look good. Ryan, to this point, I don't trade Chris Godwin for Olave. I know a lot of people will be like, "Yo, that's a huge upgrade," but I think you're going to get like 7 to 8 solid weeks out of Chris Godwin coming from the slot. You're probably going to get a decent amount, like 5, 6, 7 receptions a game, 40 to 80 yards from Chris Godwin, at least 7 games this season. And Olave, yes, Olave has the chance to go 9 for 120, but he also equally has the chance, just like Chris Godwin, to go 2 for 11. These two players, to me, despite their draft disparity, statistically from a fantasy football standpoint, are almost exactly, statistically from a fantasy football standpoint, almost exactly the same stat-wise. So this is neither an upgrade or a downgrade, even though Olave's name is higher. This feels like a lateral move, if anything, from a back end, from a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 standpoint to a weekly flex standpoint. Both of these players, for me, even knowing Olave's draft position, are basically back end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. If you're in a 2 wide receiver league, they're flex players. Both of these players to me are flex players, and I wouldn't trade one of these flex players for the other because I don't think that either is I don't think it's a better move. Ayuk owner also has JJ and Jamar Chase. Yeah, Ayuk, if that's the point, if you're sitting there and somebody has, I don't know how that happened, right? Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, they must have been drafted at the back half, and Jamar Chase with all the concerns about the contract. Ayuk is totally a targetable guy, RGQ. Defensive question here, hold the Niners or drop for the Jaguars? I think it's always worth holding the Niners defense, but again, you got to consider that they did, from a fantasy perspective, Joe, we were looking at the Niners last year in terms of their numbers, and they did struggle with some things, just like Philadelphia struggled against the pass last year. Is it worth it to think about Jacksonville, though? Jacksonville does play Tennessee.
Jacksonville's my DFS pick of the week. There's no doubt about that.
I think in terms of this week, I think if it was this week, I think I'd play Jacksonville.
But I'm not cutting the Niners.
But I'm not cutting the.
If you have another piece of easy cut-offable fat on the back end of your roster, I would cut off the fat and then just take Jacksonville. There's nothing wrong with holding an elite defense on your bench.
So for us this week, it's a start on Colby Parkinson, Steve. Colby Parkinson had good involvement in that game. Puka went down. You know, we don't know if Tyler Johnson or Demarcus Robinson is going to pick up the slack for Puka, but we do know that Colby Parkinson is going to be a part of that game plan. They play Arizona. We saw that Dalton Kincaid kind of got shut out in that game, which was a little bit distressing, but Dawson Knox also got some reception. So I'm not really worried about Parkinson in that game. Parkinson's a full go for me this week. Freiermuth isn't.
Talk to me, Bob.
I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Pat Freiermuth, but you know, he has a really, like most tight ends, he has a really low floor and not a really high ceiling at all. You know, this is such a low volume passing attack until maybe Russell Wilson comes back, and Russell Wilson will probably target him in the red zone a little bit. But I'm on Parkinson. I don't think Muth is actually in there. Would like some value though for the 49ers because I accidentally auto drafted them in round 7. That's rough. It happens.
It does.
If you were here in the off season, we auto drafted. Who did we auto draft in like the 4th round?
We had like 3 drafts in like a 4-day span where I put someone in the queue and then it glitched and then auto drafted. One of which was we took Love McConkey in the 4th round, but we were able to get him the 9th consistently. We were upset about that. We definitely did with Monty at least once. Same situation.
So RTQ, you know,
it was all our late players we loved that kept getting picked off. And then anytime I ever put Rashad Bateman on a roster, I had to tell Bob about that because he hates me having Rashad Bateman.
So RTQ, yeah, I think it's not. I think Ayuk is definitely not a panic in terms of starting. Is Russell playing or Fields? It doesn't matter.
On the note of the Niners receivers, someone asked earlier about long-term answers.
Sergio, we'll get to your question. Marlon, thanks for sticking around. We'll get to your question. Greg, we'll get to your question as well.
We have both of the Niners receivers ending the year in the top 12. So we don't really worry about it. So long-term plans of starting Najee, first off, Fields 100% is going to be the starter. Tomlin isn't letting Russell Wilson play in that Denver building at all. He's not letting him. So Russell Wilson will not be starting over Fields. We're loving Najee this week.
Yeah, we're loving Najee this week. As Saquon, running back 1 this year, I think he has a pathway. I was telling Joe, and Joe, he was not a guy we were drafting in our best ball leagues.
Yeah, let's break this down a minute.
Because what'd you say?
So we'll break this down a minute.
Because we had some concern. There was a lot of concerns about volume, and especially that volume during the red zone. Now, I'm not going to take I'm going to be cautiously optimistic with one game. But when we look at the opportunities that are going to be given, and this is what we talked about on Tuesday as well, high volume, good value opportunities are going to come Saquon's way. And there's a very logistical possibility that this season, if Saquon stays healthy, that he could finish with 12 plus touchdowns by what we saw his usage of this past week. I think I think there's a couple players that could get in his way of being a running back 1. One of them being Christian McCaffrey, even with the injury happening, he still has that possibility. The other being Breece Hall as an overall number 1 running back. And you also have always the potential of one of those Detroit guys coming in, and maybe Devin Achane breaks off 2 50-point games this year, right? Which definitely will elevate his stats to an RB1 over the course of the year. But I think, and this is what I said earlier in June, is Saquon would hurt Hurts more than Hurts would hurt Saquon. And that's kind of the value that I'm putting on Saquon right now. So do I think Saquon has the possibility to be a running back 1 overall this year? I think he could be RB1 overall. Yes. Do I think it's likely that he is? I think it's more likely that he ends up in the top 4.
So running back 1 for your team might have been the question as well, and that is possible. But one of the things I want to hit with Saquon.
Hey, Andrew, welcome. We'll get to all the questions in a moment.
Because it hits to this point overall. Historically speaking, unless you are an elite established superstar and you switch teams, almost always you are slated into the same usage as the role you were replacing. So you see a guy switch from, or just like a receiver switch teams, like Hollywood Brown did, for instance. Hollywood Brown is not an elite superstar. When he comes back, he is going to be slated in as Kansas City's receiver 2 statistics. But when you have an elite superstar, which is part of why I'm wrong on Gibbs, I did not consider him one. I slated him in and downgraded Dell as a result of this. But Diggs flat out stole and is going to continue to steal tight end numbers. That's fine. The thing with Saquon was I also just slated him in as another running back, a run-of-the-mill dude. I know if you say that sentence 5 years ago, it's blasphemy. I thought that's where he became. So when we're looking at everything over the offseason, I just treated him as another basic running back in the Eagles. And that's why when you look at our drafts all throughout the summer, you barely see us take Saquon because he went in the second round almost universally. And we were so high on Henry because Henry, the running back 1 spot in Baltimore, is massive. So I do think Henry also belongs on your list, Bob, as someone who could be running back 1 overall for the league. But RGQ, if your question is he going to be slotted as an RB1 for a roster all year? Yeah, probably. We just don't have him as high as
I think, like I said,
as Henry, and certainly not as high as the San Francisco receivers.
I think he'll be running by the end of the year. I think he'll be top 4 at minimum. At minimum.
Well, there's always injury with him.
To Conscious's question here, it's Sutton. Sutton. If you're thinking about Sutton versus Javonte, it's Sutton.
Bob, I don't know about this. See, I've been digging into Denver a lot. I know Sutton's the most talented player there, but here's the issue with Denver, and this has to radically change. And there's now 18 games worth of history that says it's probably not going to. Mm-hmm. He doesn't throw the ball downfield as a coach. Russell Wilson didn't throw it downfield. Nix didn't throw it downfield. And when you look at that as a result, I don't think any of those 3 you are going to be happy putting into your starting lineup as it sits today. Mm-hmm. However, with Justice Hill, you have the lottery ticket that says, well, if Henry goes down, Justice Hill will be a dog because, as I said, Baltimore running backs go through the roof. So if you're talking about a start for this week, I don't think Sutton's going to do anything against Joey Porter Jr. He shuts down number 1 receivers, and he is the only receiver in that room. He's who Porter will be on. Mm-hmm. So if we're talking just this week as a start, I'm going Javonte for all the stupid checkdowns in PPR. If you're talking about a trade for one in the long run, it's Justice Hill all day.
So, yeah, I mean, Joe's absolutely right. Joey Porter Jr. is one of the better cornerbacks, if not one of the top 5, top 6 cornerbacks in the league today, top 3. That is coming from 2 Steelers fans, but also logistically as NFL fans. Like, he's good. He's good. You know, when we look at that matchup, it's gonna be hell for Bo Nix. Bo Nix could probably throw 2-3 interceptions in this game. He's going to be pressured.
He's going to sack at least 6 times.
He's going to be pressured a lot. But the problem is, I don't know. Javonte Williams' usage last week was not encouraging so much. It was pretty much an even, not an even split, but snap-wise, in terms of snaps on the field between him and Jaleel McLaughlin. So actually, if it were this week, you know, I initially said Sutton, but, you know, as thinking about it more right now, I actually think, you know, you LOL at Justice Hill. Justice Hill might be the better start out of those 3 this week, considering the matchups. And considering, you know, as it comes down to it, they might want to, you know, Baltimore's they're not going to pass it to Justice Hill as much as they did last week, because that was kind of a game script kind of mentality. But, you know,
he is their passing back, though. He is their starting passing back, because it ain't Henry.
So imagine if the Eagles did a fake tush push and hand off to Saquon to jump over the center. Dude, that is what could happen. That's the thing about Saquon is so.
Now they're going to do the old NCAA play where they pitch it out to the outside, because you don't suck everyone to the defense, do a fake, and then go into where the fake is. That's just bad play design. What you would get is what a couple of, in fact, Atlanta did it last week. The fake up the middle end around. That's what you would get from it. But just to give you play design.
Yeah. And in terms of Saquon, I owned Saquon last year. This year in my home league, in my 12-team home league, I decided to go A.J. Brown over Saquon, and I ended up going A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp. And my friend, who knows me very well, they always do this first, second round kind of shot bet. and whoever gets the most picks for everybody right, the other person drinks a shot of Malort, which is gross. But it's a punishment, and it's supposed to be a punishment, not a delight. So when I looked at it, both of them had me slated taking Saquon Barkley, and I almost did. If I didn't like AJ Brown as much as I did, I would have taken Saquon. And if Saquon would have fallen back to me, because this is a very running back heavy league, I don't think AJ Brown would have fell back to me. But RGQ, to your point, that is disgustingly good. I love that so much. So back here to Sergio, Jalen Wright and Adonai Mitchell are available to pick up. Should I pick them up now? We talked with George Plays the other day, and RGQ was in that chat as well. Marlon was there as well, and a couple other people who are here today were in there as well.
Welcome back, team players. If you haven't officially subscribed, by the way, please do that.
Jalen Wright is worth a pickup right now, and I'm surprised he's not picked up right now, knowing the health of Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. Adonai Mitchell, he got involvement, which was nice to see. But what wasn't nice to see was a 9 for 19 completion percentage from Anthony Richardson. So that's concerning. But also, I'm not concerned about Anthony Richardson at all, because that was electric, right? He's throwing the ball really far down the field. So out of those two players, who do I pick up? I pick up Jalen Wright. If I own those two players, I'm holding both of them right now. So Sergio, your team is Lamar, Olave, McLaurin, Bijan Kincaid, Flex ETN, Flex Worthy. Elliott is kicker, defense, and then the bench is Chase Brown, Benson, Sutton, Lazard. I'm gonna tell you something real. You might not like to hear it here, Sergio, but Lazard, it's their relationship between, and this is just like from a fan viewpoint, right? The relationship between Alan Lazard and Aaron Rodgers is so like unhealthily like existing in our fantasy circles that I'm just not understanding it at all. Like, Alan Lazard was good enough at Iowa State, but like I don't understand why he's like still like being a thing for Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor there. If I were you, I would try to turn Lazard's performance this week. I'd try to talk up that performance and say that that's probably going to happen again. And I'd try to move Olave and Lazard to try to upgrade a little bit at my wide receiver 1, or even try to pair Olave and Lazard and go after and make your team a little bit more complete. Maybe go after and target maybe 2 of those rookie wide receivers like Keon Coleman, and get another running back on the back end. Like I said, maybe like a Ford. I think that Olave, people want to buy Olave right now. And like I said, for the reasons I'm out on Olave, and he could turn out to be pretty good. But I think structurally, from a team building standpoint, that when we look at your team, which it looks like you start one running back a week, and 2 flexes, I think that McLaurin and Olave, I like McLaurin's potential, but Jaden Daniels needs to not run the ball 27% of the time for McLaurin to be actually a very valuable fantasy asset, especially as a wide receiver 2. He's definitely more of a flex wide receiver on a week-to-week basis. I would move on from Olave, and I would try to build Lazard's game, or even Bucky Irving, right? We like Bucky Irving, but again, if you can take those 3 players and upgrade yourself significantly in another sector, or even move on from ETN, maybe pair Olave and ETN and try to target someone who might want to sell Kyron or sell Derrick Henry or something like that, and then get some back end like Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey kind of pieces, maybe even a Jacoby Myers or a Brandon Cooks kind of piece in there to make your team a little bit more complete. I know Joe has probably some thoughts to say about that as well. But let's if you have a thought there, Joe, we can get there. If not, we can head to
so let's hit it. So my whole thing is yeah, Bob, you're 100% right. You got to move along.
We see you there.
You have 3 pieces there in your receiving world, because I would be starting Worthy. But between Sutton and Olave, I believe you should be able to pair them for a significant upgrade. I also wouldn't mind
Andrew as well.
I wouldn't also mind seeing Chris Brown be involved in a trade, because I really don't believe he's going to be going anywhere. So you could include 3 of them there and get an upgrade at receiver. I think that's probably your best way of going about it here, because Cam Sutton, and Olave, quite frankly, their seasons are not bright. They got name values still. Capitalize while you can. Quite frankly, even trying to get the stack with Zay. Olave for Zay straight up might be a good spot because you have Lamar.
Especially if this is PPR we're talking about.
Yeah. So like I said, that would just kind of be my starting spots.
But in terms of who I would get rid of to pick up Jalen Wright, I'd consider getting rid of my extra. I'd consider not carrying 2 defenses. I don't think it's really logistically, unless you have to carry 2 defenses, it's not really smart to
and
carry.
The Chargers would be the one you would cut.
I know you're starting the Chargers because of Carolina this week. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but the end of Baltimore's matchup ain't that bad either.
Yeah.
Their home opener against Vegas is not bad.
So Bryce here, do I start Dak or Tua?
Tua.
So Dak is our second best quarterback on the Sunday slate. But when we look at Miami here, they're going to pass the ball a lot.
Miami doesn't have a running game, and they need to win.
Yeah, because the injuries.
Because they know they're not beating Buffalo at the end of the year. They have to beat Buffalo at the beginning of the year.
Sergio suggests Dak, and there's a good cause to say that Dak against New Orleans could be a great play, but I think I start Tua, and that's just based on what we've seen in the past there. If I were to trade Jamar Chase and Ayuk for who should I trade for? I really want to replace Chase with a very good running back. I feel like they make more points. So Marlon, based upon your team, you have Saquon, Chase, Ayuk, Mixon, Rice, and Kincaid. I think if you're going to move on from Chase and Ayuk, I think that a guy you could probably target. I mean, you could definitely target the highest of the high. You could definitely target Bijan. You could definitely target Breece Hall. It's going to take a lot to get them, but you're offering a lot. And maybe I try to find whatever running back owner I'm looking at, right, is maybe I look at the Kyron owner. And especially why I say this is maybe I look at the Kyron owner or the Hall owner or the Bijan owner and see what rookie wide receiver they have, right? Because you do want someone to absolutely replace Jamar and Ayuk. And you might be able to kind of package something together like Jamar Chase and Ayuk for like Bijan and Ladd or Kyron Williams and Keon Coleman, and potentially a James Cook. Everybody forgets about James Cook. Please don't forget about James Cook. James Cook is a good player, and he should be targeted for right now. This game he's going to be treated well in this game, I think.
If Buffalo wants to slow it down, yeah.
RGQ, we'll get to that too. So I got offered Jamar Chase and Dallas Goedert for my DK Metcalf and DJ Moore 12-team PPR. Should I do it?
I mean, who doesn't like Goedert?
I'd consider it. And the only reason I consider it is not because I'm high on Joe Burrow this year. The wrist injury does concern me. The videos that I see, he says, "Oh, I was just taking a water break. Oh, I was just relaxing." But he's going like this, and it's not. When it starts to get cold, that's going to start hurting a little bit more. Jamar Chase was involved, but if I can move off, I don't know, like I said, DJ Moore had a rough week. George plays, and a lot of our other viewers will tell you, that was a rough week. But there is potential for upswing ahead, right? I don't think DK and DJ Moore are worth it to me. I don't think that Jamar Chase and Goedert are worth it enough for me to give up those 2 players. But again, Jamar Chase could potentially be electric. So this is your time to buy Jamar Chase, right? And this is a really relevant offer. I think it's a fair offer. But I don't know if I would do it necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. I mean, it's a tough call. I don't think I'd do it either. Just to answer.
I don't think I'd do it. So RGQ. So do I just play 49ers defense for some reason? Yahoo has them projected 6.96 points. I would have thought 49ers would get to sit Darnold see his ghosts again. Yeah, you totally can see his ghost again. I mean, there were a couple injuries to that back end, I believe, with Taylor Hafunga last week. That could always be problematic, right? But when it comes to 49ers here, do you start them this week? They're playing Minnesota, and Justin Jefferson could always go over the top on you for like 140 yards. But it's like, is your scoring related to sacks and interceptions? I think that they're definitely going to chase after Sam Darnold a lot. So I'm with I'm on 49ers, and I think Joe will agree with that.
Yeah.
Achane for Gibbs, straight up full PPR. Oh my gosh, Andrew, this is a tough choice. This is a really tough choice, Andrew.
It's not. Wait, which one do you have?
Yeah, that's
because the long-term answer I want Gibbs, but I don't want to get rid of Achane until about week 6 because I want to milk him to get everything you can out of Achane and then get rid of him for Gibbs. Because Miami falls apart after Halloween. We all know that.
He has Achane.
So keep him until week 6. That's the answer.
So he has Achane, get him for and giving up Gibbs. And here's the thing, like Andrew, when we talk about Achane, he's hurt right now. The offer is on the table for you probably. You could say, hey, let's wait a week and let's revisit this. With the injury that could hurt you. If you do it now, both of these guys could end up, doing some stuff. But I would do it. I think I'd do it. And Joe suggests to wait a little bit until you can milk Achane a little bit more. I would say it's probably safe to kind of do it now. I don't know. I like Achane a lot, but I do like Gibbs a lot. I do worry about the split, but there's a split in Miami too. So you're kind of just trading, a little bit of column A for a little bit of column B, and I think it's fair enough. I'd do it, but like Joe said, maybe wait a little bit more to do it. So RGQ for my Reed stock, Love is coming back, right? It's a minor injury. Andrew says that, yeah, and this is from what we hear. 3 to 4 weeks is kind of what we're looking at here. Save Reed. Even if you're worried about, even if you want to go out and get a player like Joe said earlier, go out and target Reed because, like we said, Reed after this week, Malik Willis, right? That is all that we need to say about that. Miggy, should I get rid of Wan'Dale Robinson and what can I get for him? I don't think you get rid of him, and I don't think you can get rid of him.
That's pretty much it.
I think, and this is coming from a guy who has Wan'Dale Robinson on his team, is starting him in my second flex this week because of Mostert's injury. And also I'm starting him over Jaden Reed because of what Malik Willis just does to my soul. And, and stats back up that he's not good. He's just not good. And so when we look at things here and we ask ourselves and say, is it worth it to have Wan'Dale Robinson this week? I think absolutely. If I drafted Wan'Dale Robinson, this might be the only week that I play him outside of a bye week. Here's why, right? He's the slot. Daniel Jones, we know, is hot garbage. Also, not as bad as Malik Willis, but really not doing as well as his pay should do. So, but when you look at it, you look at what happened last week. And, I'm just making this comparison just because, this game is probably going to be really gross, but it is an NFC East game, and those tend to not go the way you plan them to go. Washington can beat Philadelphia, and it's just weird. The NFC East can be weird against each other. But what I will say is Chris Godwin went 8 for 8 out of the slot last week. 8 for 8. Wan'Dale Robinson got targeted 12 times. I believe he caught 5 of them, right? He's going to get targeted a lot this game because obviously that is one of the weakest points of Washington's defense, right? And if Wan'Dale Robinson can even go maybe in a PPR league 6 for 40, that's 10 points right there. And I'm keeping that. I'm keeping that around, and I'm starting him this week because it's the only time that I'm probably going to start him unless they play Washington again, and Washington still sucks. So that's kind of where I fall on Wan'Dale Robinson. And he didn't have a good enough week that he's worth trading yet. And if you were to have a good enough week, you're going to have to package him, say, with a Chris Godwin type of caliber player, or you're going to have to package him with a Jacoby Myers or even higher to even think about upgrading. This is like when you see Wan'Dale Robinson right now is like one of those dollar cards in the trade up challenges that you might see on TikTok, right? You got to really work your way up if you want to upgrade Wan'Dale Robinson. I'd keep him though. Should I drop Bucky Irving for Tajay Spears? I don't think so. We love Tajay Spears. We loved him in the offseason. We do think that Tony Pollard is going to get a decent amount of reps, but I think that Bucky Irving right now is a hold. I think if I have Bucky Irving, I'm holding him. And if there was somebody else droppable on your roster for Tajay, to pick up Tajay because Tajay is going to assume some, even if Pollard goes down, is going to assume some of that. So I think, I keep Bucky. I'd consider it though, and I know Joe probably would consider it as well, if not just outwardly do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Marlon, how do you rate Malik Neighbors? The guy that has Bijan also has Malik Neighbors, so maybe Chase and Ayuk for Bijan and Neighbors. I don't
really
want
to get rid of Chase and Ayuk.
I don't really like Malik Neighbors, but how I would kind of approach this, how I would approach this is kind of like, okay, start out with here's the thing. Start out with Chase for Bijan. Just be like,
do that.
I want to get the conversation going. Chase for Bijan. See what they do. They might accept it. They might come back for you and say, okay, let's do Chase and Ayuk for Bijan and whatever. And they'll start naming that price, but you're dictating the trade. You're dictating the trade because you offered it to them. You're thinking about what they offered you. I think that's the way to go about this, Marlon, is when it comes to first rounders, people have this kind of odd thing where it's like, oh, if I drafted Chase, say Chase went 5 overall and Bijan went 6 overall. Maybe that guy really did want Chase. I don't know your league mates very well. Maybe that's happened. Maybe Chase went later because of the contract issues. So I definitely think about that more before I would offer out Chase and Ayuk, because I think nearly almost all the time people will accept Chase and Ayuk together, regardless of kind of what they're giving up. Off-topic fantasy football question: do you still believe in Caleb Williams? I don't know if I ever believed in Caleb Williams, but the better question, the better thing is that, do I believe that in a year's time he'll be better than what they've had on their team in terms of a passer? I believe he could get there. I believe that, we'll see at some point this season Caleb Williams throw for 180 yards. Then eventually he might hit that 200-yard mark. Could be soon, could be later on in the season.
That's how pathetically low those numbers are, right, Bob?
I understand that. That's what I'm saying. Do I believe in him? No. But do I think that he could get to a point where I could believe in him? Yes. Am I nervous because I drafted him as a second quarterback? Yeah, absolutely. That game last week was atrocious. 84 yards is nothing. Or was it 96 yards? Something like that. Allie, we see you. Marlon, I see that. Yeah. So should I do Marvin and Ladd for Nico? Oh my gosh. Okay. Ladd is my flex, but I have Marvin, Neighbors, Evans at wide receiver, and I don't want all these rookies. I would actually trade Neighbors and Ladd.
Yeah, because Buffalo can't get, the Giants can't get the ball out. The Giants have a really bad offensive line.
I would see if I can float Neighbors and Ladd for Nico first, and then see if they come back with Marvin Ladd. I don't like giving up Ladd McConkey. I think he's going to be very valuable as the year goes on, but Nico's more valuable. Nico's in a better offense with a better share of those targets, and he's definitely, the alpha. Even with Diggs and Dell there, he's definitely the alpha. So if I could have a team with Marvin Harrison Jr., Nico Collins, and Evans, that would be good in my book. I would try to do that. So I'd propose, before I did Marv, I would do Neighbors and Ladd for Nico. He might want Marv, come back for it. I'd still consider that, Joe, because I really do think Nico is definitely very, very valuable.
Nico's 100% a musket guy. I mean, there's no way around that.
Marlon, is Sutton droppable? I'd consider it depending upon I'd consider it depending upon how my league rosters were. Like if the best wide receiver out there right now is like, DeMarcus Robinson, or the best wide receiver out there right now is Brendan Rice or A.T. Perry, then I wouldn't do it. But if the best wide receiver out there right now is like Adonai Mitchell or Yosheviz or Myers, yeah, I'd consider dropping Sutton for a guy like Myers or a guy like Cooks if he's available. Allie, I have 4 2026 somehow and Worthy. Wanted to trade them for JJ. Do you think this is enough? Do I think it is enough? Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Wait, if it's a dynasty league, I don't think I want to move Worthy.
It's enough, but I don't think I'd do it. I don't think I'd do it. And if I were to move all of those picks for and Worthy for JJ, I'd try to get
Well, that's 2026. That's 2 years out.
That's 2 years out.
How do you already know your draft position 2 years out?
Hey, dynasty leagues work in crazy ways, dude.
That's true.
I'd consider it. I'd absolutely consider it because you want to win now. Worthy gives you an opportunity to win now. So does Justin Jefferson. Depending upon the structure of your team, Allie.
I'd rather have Worthy today, though.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that.
All he has if Addison goes out for the year and he's not going to play this week, J. Jeff is much diminished because of that. I mean, you can literally double team him every play and not worry about it. That's what the Niners are about to do. And the pass rush that gets to Minnesota, I'd rather stick with Worthy. I'd rather hitch my wagon to Mahomes than to what will probably be a different quarterback in 2026.
Marlon, you've tried the 1-for-1 for Chase, and he said no way. Okay, sweeten the deal, sweeten the pot. Try it.
It probably means he doesn't want to get rid of Bijan and has no other running back.
Yeah, that could be a possibility as well. Kind of just float it out there, ask him to say, do you even want to like?
Yeah, you can start with it. See if he's even interested in considering
because
it.
Some guys,
your time and clout.
Some guys don't even want to do that, and you might have to have a backup plan there. I like this comment here from RGQ. Who knows? Maybe Malik Willis dials it in. Hey, yeah, right. 9 career games, 31 for 61, 280 yards, zero touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Maybe he dials it in and throws 6 more interceptions like Nathan Peterman does. The dude was a terrible draft pick by Tennessee. Liberty. There's been players like Carson Wentz that have had successes in the NFL from going to a small school, but a team like Liberty with at least North Dakota State was like a good team for a while. And Liberty was just like good 1 year. I don't know, man. That's kind of lame. Malik Willis is so bad. I just can't. For anybody that watched that game and had the pain of being a Tennessee Titans fan and watching Malik Willis play last year, I just feel like we just lost like 7 years off of our life by watching him play. It was probably one of the worst picks of all time, even including Jamarcus Russell. For trades on Yahoo. Do you know if a trade gets accepted today, would I get the players next week? I think
it depends upon your league settings.
Yeah, I think it's all on league settings. I think once the game starts tonight, those players are locked for most leagues. Then I think if my league on Yahoo has like everybody votes, and usually the trade will go through anyway, and then it takes like 2 days to get a trade, I think, to go through realistically. So I'd definitely check your I don't want to give you bad advice on that.
And your commissioner also can force it through immediately if they prefer. It all depends upon your league settings.
I would check with your commish. I have 4 different first round picks, not one yet. Don't know if that got no. We got that. We know. I think Joe still loves Worthy so much this year, and that you could get
for the 4 first round picks. You might be able to get JJ for just 3 first round picks. I'd start with that. Forget about moving Worthy. Just 3 first round picks. You want to sell JJ.
Yeah,
that's a different trade. I'm talking there.
So who should I drop, Sutton or Khalil Shakir? I drop Sutton. If I'm making any move, I'm keeping Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir is tied to a great offense, a good quarterback, and Sutton is not. Just float, get that conversation moving a little bit, Marlon, and be like, maybe trade see what other assets he's interested in. I know he's probably interested really a lot in Ayuk. I definitely pump the brakes on trading Ayuk, though. I do think you're getting a good enough return, but I don't want to move Ayuk yet. Should I trade K9 and Ridley for ETN and Pittman? I have Bigsby on my bench. Ridley is currently my flex option, and K9 is my running back 2 behind Kyron. It's full PPR. So, Abraham, we are of the mind that we do like K9. We are worried about ETN, but you do have Bigsby, so that's not so much a super much concern. So this, for me, Ridley is a guy that, who knows? Also, Pittman, I want to trade out of Michael Pittman. I don't want to trade into Michael Pittman. So would I do this trade? I wouldn't. I wouldn't do this trade because I don't want to trade into Michael Pittman, and I don't want to trade into ETN, even though I have Bigsby. Because, from a week-to-week basis, I don't think it's really profitable outside of, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery to start 2 running backs from the same team every week. And you're playing the back and forth between Bigsby and Etienne. And K9's injury, definitely a little bit of concern for you, maybe. I wouldn't do that trade, especially if Kyron is your number 1 running back. I don't think I'd do that. Joe, where do you fall on that?
So the thing is I like Kenneth Walker. I mean, there's no way around
it. That's true.
So I think that Pittman is a dead asset. So
hey, Brad,
I don't want to
welcome.
do anything about picking up Pittman. I understand that you have Bigsby, but here's going to be the problem. Unless Etienne gets hurt, the transition between Etienne and Bigsby is going to be kind of slow. And you're going to be giving yourself roster hell every Sunday morning of flipping the dice to see when is Bigsby going to take him over? Will he ever? I don't know. So I don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're going to have a harder time every Sunday morning and be stuck with Pittman. If you do want to trade them, I would look for a single player upgrade when you're talking about a significant jump up. A King Henry, for example. We talked about Saquon before. That would be the neighborhood I would look for rather than trying to do a match-for-match trade. Mm-hmm. And if they want to do balance, just take some piece of crap off the back end of his roster.
Here's what I would even think of. If I'm trading K9 and Ridley, I would consider Pacheco a slight upgrade on K9 on a week-to-week basis, especially in the offense.
He is, yeah.
And maybe I'd go, Pacheco and Coleman or Pacheco and Shakir for K9 and Ridley.
See, I'd go all in for the upgrade of running back.
I know, but if you wanted a 2 for 2, that's something you could think about doing. RGQ said DeMario Douglas is the only good player out of Liberty. I wholeheartedly 1,000% agree with that. Incognito, you have Laporta, Monty, McLaurin, or Laporta and Monty and McLaurin, or Ken Walker and Kyle Pitts. I'm keeping Laporta, Monty, and McLaurin. I own Kyle Pitts, and I regret owning Kyle Pitts, and I will continue to regret owning Kyle Pitts. That is the way that owning Kyle Pitts worked. That touchdown saved his game. He didn't play great. He was wide open. That was busted coverage. He was wide open. If he didn't have that we would be talking about Pitts not having a subpar week like we had everything else. I still believe in Laporta. I still believe in Monty, and I do believe in McLaurin. I do like Ken Walker as well, but Pitts is not enough for me to give up both Laporta and Monty and McLaurin for that matter. I would need more. If I was giving up Laporta and Monty together. Should I start Worthy or Metcalf? Brad, DK. I think DK is the start. Although there is that kind of thing in the back of my mind. Our rankings say DK. My heart says I like Worthy a lot as well. But I think that DK is the play this week if I'm starting somebody. What do you say, Joe?
We have DK Metcalf through the roof, man. Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. Incognito. Here's the thing with Worthy, and don't get me wrong, I have him in a couple of my DFS lineups. But the thing with Worthy is that when you see, especially in week 1, the number 1 get outshined by a rookie, especially a rookie, unless that rookie is the next, supposed to be what James Harrison's going to be, they tend to get it pulled back in week 2. So I don't see we're going to sink.
Yeah. Joe, you kind of froze.
We're going to see one, and that was part of what made Worthy super, super awesome.
Okay. So, yeah.
So long story short is I don't think Worthy's going to get as much touchdown production as he did last week. And I think Decaf is the converse. He's going to get a lot of volume pushed his way, and you're going to see a lot of push up. That's why I'm DK over Worthy.
Steve, I totally understand this. Thursday night games are such a stressor. We need to go back to not having Thursday night games.
I disagree. I love having Thursday night football.
It's not going to happen. But from a fantasy perspective, Thursday night games are a giant stressor. I like watching the games, but I tend to not really like owning any of the players in the games. There was one point in my life that I used to sit any player that was starting on Thursday, regardless of the matchup, because I just wanted to sit down and enjoy the game. I didn't want to stress about it. I totally understand. And I think what you're doing here, Mason, Pacheco, and flexing forward, is they're going to score. All 3 of these players are going to score points. It just depends on what's going to happen. A-Chain definitely does have that boom potential over Ford, but the concern that he might not play a full load when he's already not really playing a full load is a concern worth considering. Cruz, welcome. Do I trade Chris Godwin for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Raheem Mostert? Yes. Yes. I would do that right now. Chris Godwin is coming off a game where he went 8 for 8 against a team that was not really great in the slot. You're going after Marvin Harrison Jr. If somebody is willing to take that trade, do it. I don't think that a person, if you offered Godwin for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mostert, I don't think they would outwardly accept that. But if you were proposed that, I'd 1,000% do that. What do you say, Joe?
So,
Miggy, I see. You're welcome, Abraham. Thank you very much.
I would take. I don't think that's an accept. I don't think anyone would ever accept that trade if they were getting Godwin. So
yeah, I
don't think that's a realistic trade, Cruz. But if you was offered to you and you can get Harrison and Mostert, Bob's exactly right. But I don't think you'd ever no one would ever accept giving that trade.
Yeah. Marlon here asks, do you have Jahmyr Gibbs or Jonathan Taylor rated higher? Is that this week or this year? I think if we go throughout the entirety of the year that we do have Gibbs rated higher than Jonathan Taylor. If we're going this week, I still think we have Gibbs rated a little bit higher than Jonathan Taylor, but just know that Jonathan Taylor is going to see the rock a lot this week. So yeah, we have Jonathan Taylor ranked a little bit lower than Jahmyr Gibbs this week. But just understand that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to – this game, this Indy Green Bay game, unless I'm like outwardly impressively just so wrong about Malik Willis, is going to just go in. I'm surprised that the spread's not like plus 10 points for Indianapolis in that game.
Here's the reason why, Bob. It's because LaFleur is one of the best coaches in the league. And a lot of people are giving him credit like he's had Malik Willis all off season.
I see that.
The reality is he's had Malik Willis for less than a week. This is going to be such a vanilla and going down offense. It's going to be this might be the hardest coaching test LaFleur has ever had.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we wind down, RGQ, just Abraham just subscribed. We thank you so much, Abraham, for giving us your time. We hope that you win this week.
Welcome to the party, man.
RGQ, thank you so much for hopping on. We will be off very soon. We're going to answer a couple more questions here. In Fab leagues, you can trade Fab in some leagues. Yahoo does not. I do not think that my commissioner in my Yahoo league allowed us to trade Fab, but in our ESPN league,
we do it all the time.
We do it like outside of the range, and Joe just goes in as the commissioner and just changes it.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have a commission that does that, then that's totally there. So we're going to answer a couple more questions coming down the pipeline here. Bronson, welcome back. J-Bad, welcome back. We're going to answer those questions as well. Would you start Kincaid or Goddard this week? In terms of our rankings, where do we have Goddard in terms of, the Philadelphia game is a Monday night game. So when we look at our rankings, our rankings for
just the Sunday games
for the DFS lineup for just the Sunday game. But when I look at it,
but that being said,
Goddard had about 7 points last week. Kincaid, 0.
Goddard's in there.
A little bit frustrating. Yeah.
No, I said Goddard in my head. I thought Godwin.
Yeah.
Because I just clicked Goddard.
So how do I fall along these lines? I think that when I look at it, I think I still start Kincaid. I start Kincaid tonight and just let it ride. I don't think he's going to hurt you as much this week as he did last week, but it's definitely a concern that he got 0 points last week, which I'm not going to kind of scoff at. Goddard had about 7 points in my league, and it's definitely a plus matchup, I would say, against Atlanta. But I think in terms of like game script and stuff, I think that Kincaid is probably going to be way more involved in this one. You're welcome, Incognito. Abraham, this is any trade target, so it's full PPR thoughts on the team. Lamar, Kyron, K9, Jefferson, London, Kittle, Ridley, starters, and then the bench is Javonte McLaughlin, Lockett, Hollywood, Bigsby, and Goddard. I think you could trade out of London and Ridley and really significantly upgrade your wide receiver 2 position. I think if you were to pair up a guy like London and Ridley, you might even be able and throw in on the back end, throw in either Javonte or McLaughlin. You might even significantly be able to target a guy like Amon-Ra. You might even be able to, if you don't do that, you could probably move like London and Ridley maybe for Ayuk and Coleman and somebody else. I think that could be something that you could target there. I think it's a solid enough team. I don't really like London, like we were saying this year. The stats really don't back up that London's going to have a significantly good year. Cousins looks really in pain. If Michael Penix comes in, Michael Penix could change that around. We don't know if that's going to happen, and we can't really guess.
I think it's going to happen in September.
I think I think it's really possible that you don't trade out of K9 and you trade out of London and Ridley, and you could really significantly upgrade your team. How do you feel about that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to fight that logic. I mean, like I said, I really like having K9. Now, granted, his injuries, it's part of it. But as I've been kind of recommending to people all day, look at your bench, a bench player you have that's decent that you can throw in there. So you could do, the way I would go about this is I would try to do Lockett or either London or Ridley, 2 of those 3 in a triangle to give you an upgrade on a receiver.
Like
so
here's
you probably can pull a Lockett in London for an Ayuk. I would go for that.
You could even probably do a Ridley and Lockett for a Devonta Smith. I don't think it's out.
Yeah, you can Devonta in the same tier. Yeah,
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that you can rule that. You could probably even get a Ridley and Hollywood for Zay Flowers. I think that's a possibility too. You can even try to trade up for a Nico Collins, right? You could do like a London and Ridley for a Nico. I know you probably drafted London ahead of Nico. But again, these are things to consider. Also don't forget about George Pickens, right? He was shadowed all week, still got 7 targets, still played a pretty good game. If Russell Wilson is the quarterback, he's going to do good. If Justin Fields is the quarterback, he's still going to get his reps. You know that the number 1 wide receiver with Justin Fields was DJ Moore last year, and this is the reason why we drafted DJ Moore really high. Do I think George Pickens is a good enough wide receiver? I absolutely do. So I'd consider thinking about that as well. Steve, knowing that your league is $1,000 buy-in, that is a huge thing, and I think it is safe to say that an Achane not playing would definitely damage your team more than starting Ford in your flex. I think that
but you're going to know if Achane's going to play before you click the button. You just show up at 8:15 and see if he's playing or not.
Yeah, but that's something to consider.
But also, when you're playing that high stakes, you need to swing for the fences.
Yeah, you do. But I do think Ford is going to have a decent enough showing.
Achane is going to blow Ford. I completely disagree. I don't think Ford's going to do anything this week. I don't think anyone in Cleveland's doing anything this week.
I know you don't. That's the Deshaun. Did you hear that Deshaun might have gotten a fake Twitter account to say how good he was? That was just kind of the joke that was on
Wouldn't
Twitter.
surprise me at all that he's paying someone to do that. He needs. I'd actually be upset if he didn't.
Bronson, in terms of Ladd and Keon and Terry McLaurin, it's Ladd and Keon for us. It's Ladd and Keon for us over Terry McLaurin. Despite the plus matchup against the Giants, we'll have to see how Jaden Daniels plays out, but it's definitely Ladd and Keon for us. J-Bad, sup boys, got this trade off today. Najee and Goff for my Pollard. I lost Jordan Love, so I'm leaning towards taking. Yes.
Yeah, get rid of Pollard. That's a good thing.
1,000% yes.
I would do that.
This is a 16-team half PPR league.
So Najee's more valuable in it. Yeah, I would do that.
You're going out there. You're trading one running back in a timeshare for another running back in a timeshare and upgrading yourself at quarterback because you lost Jordan Love. Yes, 1,000%.
You're also getting the better timeshare, by the way.
1,000% J-Bad. Definitely do it. Za, welcome. Need if I start one in the flex, Tank Dell, Worthy, and McConkey, or Zach Moss. I'm starting J.J. Hill in London. I would border on not starting London at all. That's our opinion based off these rankings as well. And I know
I'd probably go Dell and McConkey.
It sounds crazy, but yeah, I think based upon our rankings, we definitely have Dell pretty high, McConkey pretty high. So I think I'd actually roll. If you're looking for just one, it's McConkey. But if you're willing to sub out London, then you could start Tank. I think that Tank and London will have variable kind of matching things. The only thing that makes you kind of want to start London is that Philadelphia's secondary is not that good. And And if Kirk Cousins ends up coming
Philadelphia's defensive line is, though.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of pressure. And it's a little bit concerning here. So Chase and Ayuk for Gibbs and Devonta Smith. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that, Joe. How do you feel about that?
Ayuk for Gibbs. If you were the one getting Gibbs and Devonta, yeah, I would do that.
Yeah, I think I do that. So if I don't get accepted, the first one I do Chase, Ayuk, Chubb for Gibbs and Devonta. Sure. I mean, right now Chubb doesn't.
For the record, we're not big on Chase as much as other people are. We need to be clear on that.
Yeah, I think this is a very good trade because here's the thing: the output on a week-to-week basis between Chase and Gibbs, both of them definitely have an output that is pro plus 20 points a week. Devonta Smith and Ayuk pretty much have the same kind of framework for their teams. Is that like Ayuk could be canceled out of a game, just like Devonta Smith could be kind of like deleted from a game towards the back end of the game because he's not the guy they rely on to win the game. They rely on A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley to win the game. But if there's any discrepancies in this game, Devonta Smith can easily get 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns again in the year. Ayuk can do the same thing. So this trade is basically like...
Yeah, we have them in the same tier, yeah.
Do you rather want Chase or Gibbs, right? Do you have Devonta Smith on top?
And again, I'm a running back whore, so I'd rather have the running back.
Do we have Devonta Smith on top of Ayuk for the year? No. We have Ayuk higher than Devonta Smith on the year. So, that's why we are suggesting to not move Brandon Ayuk. But if you do want to move Brandon Ayuk, we do see similar-ish value over the course of the year with Devonta Smith. So that, for us, is a fair enough trade if you're trading out of Brandon Ayuk. PPR, if Achane's out, do you take a chance on JWJ or Wright or roll with Deontay or Higgins if active? If Achane is out, if the news says at 8:15 today or 8 o'clock today or 7:54 today that Achane is out, I go with Wright. Wright would be my play.
See, I want it. First, I'm definitely not going with Higgins. Higgins is out no matter what.
This is only if Achane is out, Joe. This is only.
Yeah, I understand that, but here's the reason I don't want to go on Wright or either one of them, quite frankly, is because short week road team. There's no way they're instilled in the game plan. At
so
least
you'd rather start
Deontay, he's the number one.
I don't like that.
It's the only answer. I think I'm looking at a bunch of turd sandwiches out there. I think it's the only valid answer.
All right, Derek. So that's kind of
the real answer is do a trade, man.
That's kind of
see if someone can still believe in Higgins and pair him up with Deontay and go get yourself a Debo.
Basically, what we're saying is we hope that Achane's not out.
Yeah, basically.
Looking to unload CMC. Whoa. Would you trade CMC, Zay Flowers, and Mark Andrews? It's always good to move out of Mark Andrews. For Kamara, Devontae Adams, and Puka, no.
No, I would trade Andrews though if you have likely. I'm just not including
CMC.
So what I would do is, I'm assuming you have Lamar. It's the only way this would make sense for your team.
You're welcome, J-Bad. Thanks so much.
Because if you have Lamar and you went all in on that, I get that. But I am not moving CMC. I would move Andrews and pair him up with another player. So I understand wanting to get Puka. I totally get that. So you might even be able to get Andrews for Puka straight up. I would be willing to do that, knowing that I want to play likely virtually the rest of the year, because I believe Baltimore wants to play likely the rest of the year. So both of them are going to be on the field every play anyway. Mike, 12. So
here's what this trade sounds like to me, as Joe kind of.
That's how I would keep the rest of it deleted. Simplify it.
This trade sounds to me like you really don't want to give up CMC.
It shouldn't.
When I look at this trade, it has a lot of players where it feels like everybody's trying to even it out, right? People don't want to take some players off their bench and drop them, and so don't want to go with 3 for 2 or a 4 for 2 or something like that. Where I fall on this is exactly like Joe said. I'm definitely trading Mark Andrews. I definitely would think about trading into Puka if I have an IR spot. If I don't have an IR spot, I'm really not interested in trading into Puka. When it comes to Kamara, Kamara is one of those guys that on a yearly basis, we always say, okay, it's time for Kamara to kind of go away in the run game, but he still just shows up in PPR. And Kendre Miller was going to be a guy for us, but obviously he's having his own problems. Jamal Williams saw some work in the late half of that game because it was out of order. But for me, trading CMC, you're not, even if CMC doesn't play these next 2 to 3 to 4 games, right? What's your roster look like? Can it withstand that blow? You too, Marlon. Thanks so much. You have a good Thursday too. Hopefully you guys win this week.
Oh yeah.
Coming back here to Mike's question, Mike. If you post your team, and we're about to go offline in a little bit, but if you post your team, we'll respond to it on Friday. We're not going broadcasting on Friday, but we'll respond to it via YouTube. If you send us a message and you show us your team, we could probably work a trade together for you if you don't have time
Absolutely.
to stick with us right now. Randy, I see you. JB, I see you. Definitely looking for those things. Which Bills wide receiver do you guys think will be their number one the rest of the season? Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman looks like a dude. And Shakir's going to have his reps. Curtis Samuel, who knows what's going to happen there. And that's kind of the way that was drafted, right? Is Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Shakir. And I think that's going to be the pecking order. I think that once Keon Coleman gets comfortable with Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback right now in football. Just strictly from an all-purpose standpoint, he can run and he can throw. He has a bullet of an arm. He can escape pressure. He's got it all. And so you look at it and you say, Keon Coleman, right there. So J-Bad, thanks again. Good luck this week as well. Randy, what do you think about Achane tonight? I can start David Montgomery or George Pickens in a replacement. Ooh, Joe.
It's Monty. I'm not risking Achane getting hurt.
In your lineup,
Monty.
In your lineup, Randy, it's Montgomery. In your lineup, it's Montgomery. What do I do with Achane tonight, JB? It depends on who you have. It really depends on who you have. And
because here's the thing. If you need a home run because you don't have any other high end guys, you have to play. You have to have a high ceiling guy. Mm-hmm. But if you already have other high ceiling guys in your roster, then you just go to the safety of a Monty, which is a very high floor guy. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would answer for you, JB, is you got to know the construction of your team. So if you let us know that, we'll be able to get you a little more deeper info, but that's basically where we're at right now.
And Randy, how do I think Kincaid will do tonight? Basing it off his performance last week, you can't really go off of that. I think it's very realistically possible that Kincaid throws up maybe like 4 receptions, 46 yards, something like that. I think that's totally within the realm of possibility. So maybe he gets 8 points. He could probably top out if he gets that red zone look, that red zone touch. Maybe you could look at like 4 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown, which would be really, really nice. But that touchdown will not come.
Randy, I'm way, way more bullish on Kincaid. I literally think that I'm going to do a double call out. You can't even bet on this kind of craziness I'm about to tell you. I think that somewhere midway through the third quarter, Kincaid is not only going to score his second touchdown, they're going to play I'm Coming Out, so you better get this party started as they go into the commercial break.
So hopefully that helps, Randy, and hopefully we've helped a lot of people tonight. Poker, let's get your question here. 18 2 QB. I love 18 leagues. Lamar and Kyler, because we're in a 2 quarterback league as well.
This is similar.
Bijan Taylor, Godwin Waddle, Pitts, Gibbs, waiver defense. Jake Moody benches Keon Flowers. That's
make your waiver defense the Jags, man.
That's a solid team, and I think this week, you're going to be pretty happy with the output of your team.
As long as you keep London on the bench.
And 314 Skip to Malu, love the name. If CMC is out, start Mason or Mike Evans, flex, full PPR. I can also sit ETN or Kamara, start both. I can't sit Cup or St. Brown. All right.
Well, we don't need to know that for the whole season right now. We're talking strictly this week.
This week,
I'd go with Mason.
I start Mason. I love Mike Evans, but I also start Mason.
Yeah, we have Mike Evans as a top 12 receiver.
I'm also most likely starting ETN and Kamara this week. I would definitely revisit that, in terms of Sunday, depending on how I was feeling at the moment.
Dude, how did you build a team with McCaffrey, Kupp, and Brown?
It's probably a keeper league. I would bet it's a keeper
has
league.
To be. Never mind. Yeah.
So yes, skip my Lou. I definitely start Mason. I know it sounds sacrilege because I always talk up Mike Evans, but I definitely start Mason this week. So team players, thanks for joining us today. We're glad we could stick with you on this Thursday. Good luck this week on your teams. Hopefully you come back on Monday talking to us about how you won. We'll be talking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. Usually we'll start out at 3:45. Tuesdays and Thursdays might be our longer days, but we're definitely going to stick with you throughout the season. So make sure to join us again. If you liked what you watched today, definitely drop a like, give us a subscribe, and so you can hit us up with the next. We'll hit you up with the next content as it comes out. So thanks again for joining us. Good luck this week, and we'll see you again on Monday.